Okay, welcome everybody to the Town Board meeting of Tuesday, March 12th, 2019. So we're going to jump right in with Mike Kaplowitz, Westchester County Legislator, and with him is Aviva Meyer. Aviva, I'm not 100% sure your title, but I know you deal with the airport issue.
Yeah, I work for the county executive, and I'm liaison to the Department of Public Works and Transportation, which includes the airport.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know if anybody else did, but that's okay.
And Aviva will be here to also address some of the airport concerns that may get raised. So,
Just handing out the pup, please.
All right.
With answers or no answers?
No answers, especially in light of today's news.
this could be the last time that Mike
$15,000 for answers?
This could be the last time that Mike appears before the town board, so it's a bittersweet moment.
In his present capacity.
we'll
I don't
make
say
In his
come
present
back.
capacity.
Yeah, I mean, he might come back to visit.
You'd always welcome
I
him.
doubt it.
Good evening. I went to Penn and I didn't pay to have anybody write my essay, which was obvious if you read my essay, but that's something altogether, different time. Good evening. How are you, Lisa? And you two also went to Penn and.
And she did pay something.
No, I did not.
The gloves are going off.
I was an English major, I could write it all by myself.
Good evening. Mike Kaplowitz, County Legislator, resident of Somers, resident of Northern Westchester for quite some time, and been here in this room and before this board and previous boards a good number of times, and thought it was a good opportunity to come kind of give an annual update and also a little bit of a thanks and goodbye. You write, what did you do this summer? And you have your essay, and it's due the first day, and it's 250 words, and almost really doesn't matter what you write, it's just the exercise and how you do it. So I spent a little bit of time, what have I done the last 22 years as county legislator, and 18 having the privilege of representing Newcastle. And what you have before you is a one sheet, because they teach you can only put it on one page because no one's going to read it beyond. Some issues that have been challenging, and some accomplishments, and some challenges that remain. So in the few,
I don't think we have the paper.
I hand it to Helen.
Take one, pass it down. I'm keeping it to myself.
8-point or 6-point font? What exactly did you use on this?
So,
We're younger.
Maybe 18 years ago you could have read this, but
you guys are tough. This is.
you are tough.
Should we start?
Let's start over. Hi, Mike Kaplan, county legislator. For 22 years, I figured out what was I doing this summer, and here you have a list of accomplishments. So, it really breaks down into two parts, and it is what you all live in your public service career, which is what you've worked on, and some of the accomplishments that you've had, and certainly the challenges that remain. And one of the reasons people have asked, why are you not running again? Why are you getting out? And I think it's because, to some extent, I feel like I've accomplished as much as I possibly can. Secondly, it's really time for someone else. I just have an internal clock, and someone else with the challenges to step forward, and the next person will be better than I am, and the person after that will be better than that person. It's progression, and that's what's great about our democracy and our system, and new people come in with new viewpoint and the like. And then the third part is that the same issues that I've been working on 22 years ago, many of them are still here. And sometimes you think you've accomplished things and they come back around again. So when you see the same issue 2 and 3 times, maybe it's time to also just have that, internal recognition. But just kind of on a check basis, and things that I think really have hopefully qualitatively made a difference in the town and throughout the county. And time will tell, and really the grade that I've asked and people judge is, have we in some small measure through our public service made our communities a little bit better because of our public service. And again, it's not for really us to judge, it's I think for others to judge. But in that, some fun things and some interesting things along the way. 4 years when I was chairman, not this past year and a half, but before, I got to experiment with the process of trying to create some bipartisanship and see whether we could set up a government that would bring everybody into into the government, no matter what their letter is before their name. And I think that was a good 4 years and a good experiment. And I think it worked in that everybody had some skin in the game, and we had a split leadership, and everybody had either a chairmanship or leadership in the legislature. And that bipartisanship was something that I desperately, and many of us, I think, looked to Washington and wish they had less gridlock and more cooperation. And we tried to exercise that here. So the experiment, I believe, the petri dish of the county is that it can work, and that there's nothing special about it except you have to have people of good faith, and you have to come to it with some good faith, and you have to work hard at it, because it is hard. It's much easier to be in a one-party caucus and just try to dominate it. It's much harder to talk through the issues. And we worked with a pretty conservative, by all accounts, county executive, and we stopped some things, we agreed to some things, we moderated others, but that's also what the legislative executive branches are about, and that's also part of the frustration that I think so many of us have, that maybe in Albany and in Washington we're seeing a little bit of a breakdown of the obligation of the legislative branch, which by all accounts it's not preeminent, it's literally a check and balance and co-equal of. And, the founders in our Constitution, Article 1 comes before 2 and certainly comes before 3, is the Congress, is the legislative branch. And we know it. You have a hybrid situation here, but I know each and every one of you, when you do discharge your legislative lawmaking responsibilities within the context of what you do, so that the people should be proud of your effort, as hopefully down in the county we also exhibited some of that leadership. Some of the specific issues, we had established the Human Rights Commission, and we recently put in place an Immigration Protection Act, which hopefully will balance in a very, very difficult issue the rights of individuals against the policing and public safety rights that are so very critical. Back when smoke-free workplace was a big issue, I used to give mock legislatures to the kids, and for a long time you'd bring them in and you'd say to the kids, when you go up to the restaurant your parents do, what's the first question they would ask? And they would say, how many? And the second question the restaurant host would ask is, smoking or non-smoking? Well, I knew I was getting old when I got the next class that came in and had never heard of that issue. Because you could smoke in a restaurant? I mean, it was just a concept that they didn't understand. And I said, oh yes, we used to have that magical wall between the smoking and non-smoking section that would keep that smoke magically away from the people that didn't want it. And they were just, completely quizzical and couldn't figure out.
Worked on airplanes for a while.
Yeah.
Remember the ashtrays? What a concept, right? You could smoke in the back and you couldn't smoke in the front. Very crazy, right? And that used to be legal, and obviously it's not. Unfortunately, it's moved in the right direction. We also used to be able to speak on cell phones without hands-free and all the technology, and Westchester was one of the first jurisdictions that outlawed that as well. So those are fights long ago, but I think society's certainly safer and a little bit better for it. In no particular order, this county executive signed off on, County Executive Latimer, very rightfully, an economic development program that the board had vetted that I think will help our housing market, our employment market, and create a biotech circle here in the county and a center, and it's the North 60 project that perhaps you're aware of. To those that are not, North 60 is 60 acres north of the medical center, and it's a barren 60 acres. And after all these years, finally a developer could come forward. We signed the agreement, and the county executive just recently put his John Hancock to it, and it's a 3 million square foot, 10,000 job, $1.2 billion economic development deal that I think will do nothing but inure to our benefit in so many, many ways. And that's something that we at the county level can do to try to incent economic development and job creation. We also had, certainly the chief job in many ways of what we all do is the budget time, and as chief financial officers for, in essence, the fiduciaries for our jurisdiction. At the county level, long before we had tax cap, we, and I and certainly my colleagues have been mindful of the tax levy. We are the highest tax county in the nation, and so much of it is because we love our schools and we invest in our schools and education and pay our teachers well and administrators to have a good product. You get what you pay for, but we pay for it, and it's expensive. And at the county level, we've certainly worked hard to try to keep that down. I went back and did the scratch math, and it came to 2.15% was the average annual increase over the 22 budget years that I've had, which is almost tax cap KAP before it was tax cap CAP. And that, I think, showed some fiduciary responsibility and certainly some, I think, due diligence relative to expenses. And with inflation running at about that 2% on a real basis, we actually just tracked inflation. So County of Westchester, you get what you pay for. We deliver a lot of great services, as you do at the town level, but I think we've done it on a pretty cost-effective basis over that period of time. When you all look back, and there's going to be a question asked, what was the thing you're most proud of? The thing I'm most proud of is something that never happened because we avoided it. None of you will remember, but the Westchester County Healthcare Corporation, which used to be the county medical center, it was a line within the county, a section within the county budget, and on 1/198 was spun off to a public benefit corporation. From that point forward, it was having some financial difficulties, and they hired bankruptcy counsel and were prepared to go into bankruptcy, whatever that meant, with its 5,000 or 6,000 employees and its over $1 billion economic multiplier. And think of the healthcare, the burn center, the trauma center between here and Albany. That's where people go when they're helicoptered in and something's really, really badly has happened. And that institution was really about out of business for a short period of time. We were able to take the tobacco monies that the county received through a settlement through the Attorney Generals in the United States, and the $15 million that we were getting each year, we turned it into a lump sum amount through a bonding, tobacco securitization. And we turned around and took the $102 million and then later re-securitized for another $50 million. And that $150 million, we wrote the check to Westchester Medical Center, and that stabilized their finances. And with new management, they were able to turn that institution around, save the jobs, and undoubtedly save some lives in that process. And they are now scrambling, like everybody else in the healthcare industry, to figure out what they're going to be when they grow up and who's actually going to survive, whether it's them or all the other institutions, Columbia Presbyterian, et cetera. But nonetheless, they're a player, and they're still someone that exists. And that was a real, again, we avoided what could have been a disastrous situation. And I think one of the highlights of working together with colleagues for the last 22 years. Something that did occur that I'm not sure you're aware of, but and others as well. But we had established a local development corporation. Show of hands, anybody know what an LDC is? Jane knows, okay. LDC is the functional equivalent of an IDA, an industrial development agency or authority. Those are for-profit, and LDC is for not-for-profit. Think colleges, universities, healthcare facilities, and the like. And we have set up an LDC. In setting that up, we've incented over $500 million of economic improvement. You know that when you go to the Westchester Medical Center, you see that glass partition that's being built, that big section. That's $250 million, and that went through the LDC. Pace University did a $100 million dormitory and some expansion. Other institutions have done as well. And that has created tax-free financing, lower interest rate, therefore lower costs, lower debt service, more successful, either a bigger project or a sustainability on the existing project. And that also has created some jobs, buttressed your housing market, put people to work, and ultimately serve the mission of the nonprofit. So again, these are things that you can do, we can do, and we've been successful at some of these background items that the man in the street or person in the street wouldn't have a clue has occurred, but in fact, feel pretty good about it. And then finally, through the environment and the consumer issues, worked on the open space policy, trying to build some ball fields. Recently, we just put in a little over $8 million into the North County Trail, again, with the support of and the leadership of the county executive, who had a recent announcement on it and has given us a lot of leadership. For years, people have said to me, what does the county do? Because the only thing I know of is this North County Trail. I don't really know anything else about the county. And people love the trail. It was getting a little worn. And by the way, we don't own the trail. The state still owns it. we just lease it, and we now have a movement in to try to actually buy it from the state for $1. So we won't have to go back to them each and every time. And then finally, people are people, and people love to see their name in lights. And years ago, after presenting maybe 1,000 proclamations, about 1,000 deep, I've calculated, I think I've given out about 3,000 proclamations. Any of you that received days, we need them back. You have to put them back in the inventory, you just got to rent them, you didn't get the day forever. I began thinking, what do you get when you get a day? Who knows? It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. You get your heart, you get your humor, you get your brain, you get your proclamation. And I said, wouldn't it be fun if? And I looked at it was a different version of it, and I said, what if we put people's names up in lights? Wouldn't that be a great way, just for a day? It would be kind of fun. And people said, that's a stupid idea. I said, well, it might be kind of fun. So I started doing it. For about a decade, I was the only one that did it. County Executive Spano wouldn't do it. County Executive Astorino at one point said to me, we're stopping it. And I said, why? He says, we're just stopping it. I don't want to do it anymore. I said, that's fine. I'm chairman of the board. You can do that, and I just won't pass any of your budgets. And so you can make that deal if you want. That's not a problem. And so the lights continued at that point, and ultimately others have used it. And it's kind of fun to really, on a serious basis, to recognize the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, Chappaqua Troop 1, and the great Girl Scouts that we have, all the wonderful groups, the Rotaries, and the Chappaqua Education Foundation. And really, this is a great town. And they're lucky to have you, and we're all lucky to have them. And it's, sometimes we tend to forget just how good things are. And yeah, we got problems, and we got challenges, and we got work ahead. But at the end of the day, it's been a real pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. I thank you for listening to this little non-humble list of some issues that I worked on. And then finally, I'll just end with the challenges, because they do continue. And as long as they keep making them, we'll keep having government leaders. The two challenges that remain, particularly in this town, the issue of sewage and the issue of particularly three parts of the town, the Riverwoods, the Random Farms, the Yeshiva, extended to the Millwood Business District. And then there are those in the town that are in the county sewer district that don't want to be in the sewer district. It's work, and I know that the supervisor and the supervisors and boards have struggled with that issue. The county legislature has struggled with it. It isn't the best. I remember sitting there and getting yelled at from somebody, I think, from down county, because my effluent was getting on them, and they didn't want it, and please stop it, and they weren't that nice, actually, and we were going back and forth, and it became a bit of tribalism, and it really wasn't our best day in our best discussion. But at the end of the day, people drink from the New York City watershed. The Croton water system is one of the oldest, and it effectively is unfiltered, and there are people who drink it daily that we want to make sure, as good surrogates, it's as good quality and pristine as possible. At the same time, we have neighbors that are struggling to try to keep up with new technologies and the costs of huge improvements in microfiltration in a world where they only have hundreds of homes to support this very expensive technology. And so somewhere between those two is the struggle that we've all had. I guess I would kind of urge the future leaders, continued and future leaders of the town, to maybe interestingly look back at what we were able to accomplish in the last 4 to 6 years in terms of procuring the 10 million east of Hudson, the 6 million as a loan from East of Hudson for the conceptual upgrade program money, the CUP money, and we got them into the sewer, the applicable parcels into the county sewer district, so no vote is needed there. And maybe see if the state or some other entities can help close, which I know the supervisor tried and everyone's tried, but maybe a chance to go back and see if you can find ways to close what was a $10 million gap, right? Need of 26, cost of 26, 16 procured, 10 short, too much. You are going to get permission from the comptroller on a per parcel basis to support, $10 million. But what I'm seeing, and I'm this is kind of a little cautionary, is I'm seeing the dark cloud descend once again down in the county. There's a candidate running down in Yonkers who is already fighting, we don't want those rich people sewage, and, they can keep it where they are, and it's not, forgetting the fact it's a county facility down in Yonkers, forgetting the fact that number of sewer districts feed into it. I think 7 or 8 different districts feed into it. The capital's paid for by people that live in Chappaqua and everywhere else, and everybody drinks the water. There's no monopoly on water quality. So it's going to take a fresh approach, and I'm excited that whoever takes my spot is going to bring some fresh eyes to it, because that clearly has not been a success, and collectively we haven't come up with a solution for that. So, that's an issue that clearly remains. The second issue that remains, and it's interesting, is the issue of the airport, county airport, and its impact very directly on Newcastle. So I'd ask Ms. Meyer Aviva if she would join me, and if any questions come up, maybe she can join me and come up and all. Want to come up at this point. Aviva's great. She used to work for the legislative branch and now is the county executive's liaison to the airport advisory group, and
Among other things.
what's that? Among other things, Aviva, that's right. Everybody does 2 and 3 jobs for sure. And it's interesting because you had done a resolution some time ago, not that long ago, and in it you cited the 2003 County Board resolution setting out the precepts of non-expansion and balance against usage. I wrote that resolution. I was chairman of the Environment Committee and worked with and I remember adding the phrase basically without any additional type flights and without any expansion at that point. And that airport is, to have an adult conversation, which is always the practical way to go, is a balance. It's a balancing act between an ongoing airport with its economic development, its travel, its commercial, its corporate, its business, its tourism, its ease of usage. How many of us, say, look, I got to run, I got to, grab a flight, and Westchester's great, and I'm going to take it down to, to Florida for the winter, for a week or two, or Florida for a longer period of time. It has a convenience, it has a reality to it, and it's a real economic presence here in the county. At the same time, it has to be balanced against the fact that it is a county community facility that's been there since 1946 and has an impact upon those who are epicentered around that particular facility. And when you look at the runways and the weather patterns, runway 1616, you have won. Congratulations, you won the lottery. The approach to it oftentimes comes right over your good town. And Mary Van Fleet and others have sent me, just recently, she couldn't make it tonight, but had sent me some videos from her neighbor, her backyard, and it is impactful. There's no denying. And if I was in that house, I too would be concerned. And in public service, I do what you do, which is we're here to serve, we're here to help people, not here to impact people in a negative way. We're here to try to be helpful to people in a positive way. But that challenge of balancing the two was, I thought, for many, many years in a pretty good teetering balance. And it kind of got unbalanced a few years ago. I have to say, the precipitating factor, and it'll be one of the chapters in the book that I'm going to write and no one's going to read, is when the previous county executive had done 3 things to bring attention to the airport. One is he got into a tiff with the chairman of the Airport Advisory Committee and tried to fire the fellow, and created a whole brouhaha over that and what the position this individual had. Secondly was the master plan, which had been out there for so long, but really didn't have necessarily the kind of public input or government input that you want and other governments and individuals frankly deserve to have, whether in the end they get what they want, at least you feel like you have some investment and some opportunity to have a say. And then the third that really lit the match and just kind of blew the whole thing up was a November 1st, 2nd, 3rd submission, and I know it because he called me up and gave it to me personally, which is, oh, by the way, here's an opportunity to privatize the airport. We're going to make a lot of money because I have to close a $15 million budget gap. You have 6 weeks to approve it. It took me a year to study it. No one's ever really done it. You have 6 weeks to do it. Good luck. Congratulations. And this will be a good thing for the county. And realized it was an unsolicited bid. It was an RFP bid. It had a whole host of environmental issues, and it just showed up without any detail, any precursor whatsoever. And the 3 of them, we watched it, just exploded the issue at that particular point. it's before us, it's here, whatever brought it to us. There's no question that myself, as long as I'm legislator, and the successor, and most importantly, the executive branch that executes, and through the good offices of our county executive and Aviva and other people's great efforts, we're going to have to continue to work hard to try to balance the environmental and the quality of life side against the fact that it's an operating airport. One suggestion I do have, and Aviva can, in questions, there's a bifurcated RFP process that'll be out. One, I believe, dealing with the environmental concerns, the community concerns, and one more on the technical side. Is that correct, Aviva?
No, I would say that it's more, one is environment and then one is about public engagement.
So there is going to be a process, and it plays very well, too, and undoubtedly, and I'll make sure that Aviva and the county executive had gotten your letter, which I think summarized it really, really well on that. And I'm also suggesting that it might be time for this board, through the good offices of the supervisor, to come on down to the county and sit around the table, as you've done with the sewage issue so often. Maybe it's time to really just kind of spend some time on the airport itself to see, what can be done. Anecdotally, I have ideas like everybody else does. You probably have all heard about a recent study that indicated that if you literally bring a plane in at a slower speed, that you can markedly decrease the noise and the impact of that particular plane. Is that something that this is an area in which we could perhaps take advantage of? Is there an opportunity to talk to the FAA to create some, what unfortunately is a bit of a zero-sum discussion, because if you don't fly over Newcastle, you'll be flying over fill in the blank, and the FAA does engage in that, whether that would be successful or not. There have been allegations, Rob's been a good member of the airport advisory. We've gotten a member on that board, and the executive was great about taking my suggestion, your suggestion, and putting him on. So we have somebody from Newcastle right at the seat, which is great, along with other affected communities. The issue of altitude, has that changed in some fashion, and is there some opportunity there that's changed? So, when you look at the growth statistics, pretty much the landings and takeoffs, the usage of the airport with all the categories has been pretty consistent. It had dropped quite a bit, and with the economy has come back. And then over year, it tends to be a 2 to 4% increase. It's kind of very inflation-like in many ways. Runway 16 is utilized, as I understand from the experts, in more on a weather basis. And those are the determining decisions whether runway 16 is going to be used. And there was, we look at the statistics, some years it went down. This past year it went up, and that varies. And therein also might be an opportunity to try to, to see if there's something that could be done there. So if Aviva has any thoughts or questions on the airport, if you have any good questions for me or for her, I don't know how you want to proceed or how you want to end, but I'm done, and in more than one way. And I thank you for listening this evening, and I promise I will probably never do this again to you.
Go ahead.
I don't want you to leave just yet. I have a question not related to, I have a question related to the airport, but something in addition to that. So are you hanging out, or are you taking off after?
No?
You'll hang?
Sure.
Have you had a chance to see the letter that was from October?
Was this the letter in response to the RFP?
RFP?
Yeah.
Okay.
So all of those, from everyone, all the comments for that were incorporated into the RFP, which hasn't gone out yet, but
So
those comments were.
with specificity in the RFP letter, it was asked to make it exceedingly clear to any outside consultant contemplating the work on this project that addressing the legitimate concerns of residents with respect to the growing and very real problem of noise pollution as a primary part of this focus. And then we list some specific issues within that category related to noise pollution. Is that going to be included in the RFP?
I'll have to look specifically at what you said, but yes, that is part of the RFP. Environmental issues, including.
So, Aviva, with regard to the letter that we sent, I'm a little bit concerned because the focus on environmental issues and public engagement, We had another request that was embedded in that letter as well. So if you can take a look at that, and potentially, I'd be interested to know whether that was added, which is that we had requested having an expert review the FAA flight data. It was a recommendation that came from our Airport Advisory Committee through the analysis that they've been doing. And what we learned was that the FAA data is so technically complex that even wonks like Rob Fleischer, who's been doing his due diligence for years on this issue, may not be able to uncover all of the sort of hidden meaning behind the data. And we were hoping that in the RFP amendment that we might be able to bring in such a technical expert to be able to really dig into the data, to be able to tell us, is it due to the changes in the flight pattern? Is it due to weather? Is it due to the use of runway 16 versus other runways? Is it an altitude issue? Is it so really kind of uncovering what those facts tell us. And so if there's a way to bring that expert in under this RFP amendment, that was something we were specifically requesting in this letter.
I just don't know, but I can check
be
with
awesome.
our planning
Thank you.
department.
Let me just add, and I've said this many times, I mean, I don't know exactly what the stats show, maybe, the airport usage has remained steady and increased 2%, and same with runway 16. And the issue has definitely, the airport issue in general definitely got a lot of attention 2 years ago with the privatization and everything else. But here in Newcastle, we're past the privatization, we're, new administration, but there's still planes flying over our heads constantly. And this was not a problem 2 years ago. And it's a huge problem now, negatively affecting a lot of people's lives. And again, it was not a problem 2 years ago, it was not a problem 3 years ago, it was not a problem 4 years ago. It's a major problem now over the last 2 years. So something has changed, and we don't know what it is, and nobody's been able to give us an answer. And we've asked for the study. It could be funded out of the airport funds, because I know that money is limited to what it could be used for. And it's a real problem when you can't, when you have all these people showing up at these meetings. And public engagement is great, but they're all saying the same thing. There's a problem, and it's gotten worse, and nobody can explain why. And that's a problem.
The one thing I would add is we do now have, thank you, we do now have some portable noise monitors, and I know that some of them have been deployed, and if more people are interested, to help us get the data in order to then look at it in a more comprehensive manner.
But I would think that if you're contemplating expansion of the airport or expansion of, I'm just saying, or however you're planning on doing it, that some sort of numerical underpinning of the current state of affairs would be a good baseline from which to evaluate things. So yes, I've seen the reports with flight data and the flight's only 2% higher, but the flight mix could actually have changed. And so, it's, you can't really get to what's driving going on. So I sort of feel that in support of Ivy's request and pointing this out, that having a fundamental analysis of what's driving the existing traffic and the current baseline to evaluate potential impacts against that baseline would probably be beneficial. And I think to not have it included would ultimately just make people feel like they're not getting the full story, and that'll just sort of expand the overall level of aggravation. And I think it probably would be a worthwhile thing to make sure is in there.
And even simpler, I think George Latimer was going to come, but I think we have many residents who would like to invite him and any other decision makers to their homes on a Sunday afternoon to hear what's going on, and that planes are coming every 3 minutes and how low they are, that you can basically see people inside, and the sound that's coming from them. So even as simple as that, just come and hear what's going on.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that runway 16 is a different route that is weather-driven. I'm under runway 16's route over on the far west end. But the people over here in the core Chappaqua portion, it's a regular basis, it's not just a weather-driven basis. So they're on a regular route, so it's not runway 16. So I think that you need to bifurcate those two things when you talk about the town of Newcastle. Runway 16 is weather-related, definitely happens when it's overcast, low, and cloudy, I can tell where they are. Everything else is a common occurrence, and it happens every day.
And, and people that live in this community, we didn't buy a house near an airport. I mean, it's all relative, right? I mean, how close to the airport. But, there are some people that, they know what they're getting into when they buy a house in certain communities. That's not the case here. This is a recent problem over the last 2 years, and that's the part that I think is most frustrating to everybody, is the failure to either acknowledge it or to figure out what's causing it. But make no mistake about it, this is a problem that's happened over the last 2 years. And there's no question that this airport is an economic driver and has benefits. I'm actually flying out of there Friday morning, actually, which I'm sort of excited about, to be perfectly honest with you.
You can wave to everybody below.
Because it's a lot easier than schlepping to other airports. But make no mistake about it, this is a problem that's gotten much, much worse over the last 2 years. And we still don't have an explanation why.
And I think the reason that we're asking for leadership from the county executive and from our board of legislators is that we don't believe that we don't want to be seen as NIMBYs, and we don't believe that this is a NIMBY issue. So we don't want to go it alone. We don't want to hire a consultant on our own to try to, only handle the issues of Newcastle. We believe that this is something that affects all of our neighbors, and so we think it's a county issue, it's not a town issue. And so, having this led by the county executive's office, I think is much more meaningful, and hopefully we'll get the data that we need to be able to take it to the FAA, to be able to make reasoned and reasonable recommendations to the FAA that are based on data, not just on noise, but also on flight patterns and what we can tell from the tracking data that we have.
And to that end, it's pretty clear in our letter dated October 11th, 2018, with specific requests and hopes that this will be included in the RFP. So I'd ask, if you have not reviewed it, and that may be, I think that's in your hand now, that you look over what we provided here, and not to sound too tongue-in-cheek, I think it's important with County Executive Latimer's good neighbor policy. We are neighbors, and we understand that we're not trying to push our problem onto another community, because it's just circular, it's not going to help anybody, but there needs to be an answer. And part of that starts with studying and again, looking at the data and figuring how we can make those changes. So, again, if this is not included, and maybe you could help us and let us know if you believe this is included, so that we don't see it after the fact and say, hey, you guys ignored what we said.
I will check
So we can look through
tomorrow.
that, so we can at least respond if necessary to reinforce why we'd like to have it there.
Okay.
This is one of the biggest issues in our town right now, is the airport issue. There's a lot of issues, construction in downtown, listen, that's a problem. We've had our controversies over the years, but this airport issue right now is probably the most negative effect on the quality of life here in Newcastle over the last 2 years.
Right, and we don't see an end in sight. Our construction is ending. This is just getting worse. And it's really impacting people, and the value of their homes that they bought is significantly impacted.
On that note. Thank you for coming.
So Mike,
Thank you.
Mike,
This, Aviva, I don't think will ever show up at a meeting.
Mike, you're the one who invited her.
Thank you.
It's your fault, it's his fault right there.
They say you get one bite at the apple. Thank you very much.
Thank
Just
you
remember
very
who
much.
invited
Thank
you.
Thank you very much.
So Mike, I have something in my supervisor's report, I'm gonna read it, all right? And I want you to correct me, because I may be wrong on one number. As many know, our Westchester County legislator Mike Kaplowitz was representing Newcastle for more than 20 years. Is that accurate? 20
Actually,
years?
it was
said 18.
2002, January 1st. So it's 17, 18 years. Because the
Okay.
first 4 years, I actually represented Croton.
Oh, got
The
it.
people of Croton had a parade and showed me out of town every 4 years, so.
Got it.
But 22 years in the county itself.
Okay, well, I'm not done. Well, he's not seeking re-election this November. I want to thank Mike for his public service. On a personal level, I very much appreciated Mike's bipartisan approach to governing. I think Mike said it best a few years back in an interview with the Somers Record. Mike said, "This legislator is a bipartisan legislator, and I hope that other government bodies would look to us as a model on how to bring people of different political persuasions together. And yes, we all get pressure from the extremes in our respective parties to be more strident and not work together. But we've resisted, and I believe the end result is a legislator has worked well for the people of Westchester." And I agree 100%.
And by legislature, I think you meant legislature collectively, but you individually as well.
I said-
I think there's,
But if
a-
I said I
think there's a
agree.
comment. I think somebody's raising their hand to speak.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Good evening.
One day, Rob.
I speak with all of us. Hi, Cynthia Manacharian. I'm a Newcastle resident from the West End. I too want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for your dedication to T-Town over the years. That's been amazing. And thank you for letting us come and visit you at your offices, different people from the West End. And I have some more work for you to do. You think you're done, but you still have some time. So Newcastle went through a comp plan update, which was great. And then they went through a tree code review, which was great. And I stood here and asked about forest sustainability. And the tree code that was in front of the town board at the time didn't really take into account that kind of work. And in fact, Jeremy looked at me and said, "Wait, you want to save the dead trees too?" And I understood where he was coming from, absolutely. And I would like to propose for you that maybe at the Westchester County level, you might look into some sort of beginning language for biodiversity areas of Westchester County to establish some sort of tree code that's not about saving the healthy trees only, but looking into how to have safety for the forest, for the diversity of the environment, since you're pro-environment.
Sounds good.
And I'd love to see that. And I think that would help.
I don't think
You.
I said that, but
Well, it
Sounds like you.
Does sound like it.
I don't think so.
but the
I thought I was kind
idea
of supporting your position.
No, you were supporting, but you said that it couldn't be done in the code that you were reviewing at the time, that I should come back. And it occurs to me that it's really an intermunicipal issue.
Right.
Certainly in the West End, it's not just the
My
little,
recollection is I was fairly supportive of your.
yes, but to have to come back and look at it in a different and more holistic way. So, why not get some tips from the
I'll get your
county?
phone number so we can chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mike, I just want to tell you, I too want to thank you for your service.
Thank you, Alex.
You know, you've been a mentor, but more importantly, you have a great gift of listening. And the fact that you take all of these disparate people and you have the patience for what it is that they want to communicate. You are pragmatic in your solutions. You are really open. At the end of the day, you act like a gentleman in all situations. And it's something that I admire a lot.
Feelings mutual.
You are a mensch and a role model. You've really done great things for Newcastle and always advocated for us and have helped us along the way in so many capacities. I'm extremely grateful, even personally grateful, in terms of how you helped tutor and guide me in terms of this starting of a voyage, but just collectively as a community, you've really been fabulous. So
Thank
you have
you.
a lot to be proud about. And
Thanks.
far be it from me to be a relative neophyte to say that to you, but sincerely comes from a real spot, a real place.
With the family connections you have and the history, that's a real compliment. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
I'll stay around.
Mike.
You want me to stay around?
I had one question that ties into Con Edison, which was,
Oh, you want real intractable issues, is that what you want?
I could ask it now before, as we come up and discuss, but my question ultimately is, North 60 is up to $3 million, 3 million square foot development, which
Right.
can be a huge
Right.
generator of business, a hotel potentially,
Yep.
lab, retail, expansion of the hospital, and we have a gas moratorium that could cut it in certain spots. And while I recognize, and some people have explained to us that there's other means to provide heat, provide power, as you will. My question is, has this issue come up to the county? Because it's not just North 60, and then it's another 20 acres of private land. So has this issue come up to the county that they have concerns about this development going forward? And then it would be to Con Edison to say, what are we doing about that, and how do we address that to make sure that this is a success? Because that's not just a Mount Pleasant Valhalla issue, it's Newcastle, Somers, Poughkeepsie, Yonkers, Putnam County, it's a huge issue.
We should get from the county executive's office up to, the town administrator, all the work that George has been doing on this issue. It is a significant issue, and it's not just North 60. It relates to the centers of New Rochelle, what they're trying to do, what White Plains is trying to do, what Yonkers is trying to do. A lot of communities are very much affected.
Even with small communities, like if we need to rent, if we want to have a restaurant move in, we can't do that.
And the irony, and I chided my colleagues just a couple of weeks ago on this issue, in that in government, we really haven't walked and talked the same game. The government sets a goal, 2040, a certain percentage renewable fuel portfolio, but no steps to get to it. And then you're surprised that, almost like Casablanca, oh my God, there's gambling going on. We can't believe this is happening. The unintended consequence could very well be that you're going to have the developers going back to fossil fuel. They're going to be going back to oil. They're going to be going back to the very type, not 6 and 5s, but 4 or 2 with, with low sulfur probably, but nonetheless, you're going to have, chimneys, spewing, oil being burned once again. And, how does that move you in terms of trying to get away from fossil fuels? So there are a lot of consequences to this. I want to hear what Jane and the good people at Con Ed have to say.
We can hear from the county at some point.
Yeah, no, the county's been.
More about what the plans are to deal with this, not just, that's a huge project,
Yep.
but even locally too.
Yeah, I don't know, the question, if I might ask, is I don't even know if John Ferrari has actually put in an application for any of North 60. His problem is that he just got our approval, our sign-off, and now he's before Mount Pleasant.
That was in January?
Yeah,
So
January,
this
early
predates-
February.
Well, you can still apply even if you
Yes.
haven't
Right.
gotten
So-
all of your.
So there's I don't just imagine, Con Ed can answer this
Yeah,
question.
that's the issue.
So specifically to your question, I don't know what stage that developer is with that project, but nonetheless, projects down the line, not that far down the line, are impacted by it. And we've done a really bad job of trying to get us in the bridge fashion over to the world many of us want to get to, which is a fossil fuel-free world. That's a great goal, and renewables are the way to go, but I don't know if you can put 3 million square feet with a geothermal installation or solar installation or any of the other things that you might do. Probably not at this point. And with a moratorium, how are we going to get there? Or does it then literally just shut the door on any economic growth here in the county?
And guess what, we have Con Edison here tonight.
So with that said, thanks all very much. I'll stay and listen.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Okay, now we'll move on to our Con Ed presentation. So we have Christine Cummings from Con Ed. I know Jane Skolnick is here as well.
Yeah, so Jane Skolnick is here. I also want to introduce my colleague, Chris Rout. Chris is the director for our Smart Solutions program, and so I know you had a number of questions about that as well, so I wanted to bring him along with me tonight. So a couple of things. I know that your town council, we have now spent quite a few evenings together at this point.
I apologize.
Has-
I'm sorry about that.
But he has done a really great job on presenting this moratorium to a number of parties, and so I'm just going to sort of get you through some of the issues that have come up, and we can talk a little bit about some of the concerns around development. So one of the first things that comes up is, why do we pick March 15th? Out of all the days of the year, what was March 15th? So you can blame me for that. I have been working for Con Ed for 18 years. The last 10 have been on getting folks to convert from heavy heating oil to natural gas, working with developers, working with large projects, working with cities to try and get gas service to them. And so knowing that, one of the concerns that I had was that if you just sort of say, well, we'll take applications until we can't take applications anymore, that's not really fair, it's not transparent. Giving someone a date really gives them a plan. At least it's not a great plan. No one's denying that it's a great plan. But it gives them something to at least work towards. So what we did is we looked at and said, how many applications do we think we're likely to receive? How many of them are going to be likely to come in and can be completed within a 2-year window? And so doing that, after we had gotten the smart solutions and we knew we were gonna have a gap between the customers that were coming in, we knew that this was gonna be important to do. And so March 15th has nothing to do with this winter. I know a lot of folks have had there's been some back and forth, well, the winter is basically over, why are you doing it now? It's simply because at some point I have to stop the applications that are coming in. I don't know how many of you saw it, but as of, News 12 had covered it yesterday, we're well over 1,100 applications just in the moratorium area alone since we announced. So that is a significant number. I will tell you that a lot of it is commercial, right? There's not a lot of it in terms of volume of cases, what we call cases, but certainly on a volumetric basis, it's a very large load in terms of what's come in and what customers are looking for. So we know the other concern, right? It's about turning around and saying a project of value to the county and to the people who live here, like North 60, what does that mean? And so one of the things that I want to be clear on is that the company is also committed to helping the state meet its energy goals, but recognizing that there is an economic reality to other programs like geothermal and air source heat pumps. Interruptible customers will be allowed. I think there's a lot of confusion about interruptible service. So interruptible service does allow customers to essentially be firm gas customers 99% of the year. So over the last 3 years, we've averaged less than 10 days a year that we've had to call a customer and say, please switch to your alternate energy source. That alternate energy source does not need to be a fossil fuel. That alternate energy source can be electric, it can be geothermal, it can be air source heat pumps. And so there is a way to do this. I have personally met with a number of developers who have said, there's some concerns about the scaling of geothermal and the other things. And so we've said to them, look, you can do this with an interruptible, but it's gonna create, it's gonna be challenging for some people who have never done this, right? Is normally you call up, you've got the project done, you've gotten all your building permits, you call the utility company, you say, okay, I need gas, we would install it, and life goes on. And now we're in a position where we have to say to developers, we need to be early on in this discussion. We'd like to be part of that discussion long before you have it. We are not concerned about whether or not you have building permits yet or not. All we're looking for you to do is give us an estimate of your load and that you're going to be able to finish your completion of your service within 2 years. So that's another issue around the timing of this, right? It's not to turn around and say, but I don't have the permits yet. Interruptible service is an option, and Chris is going to talk to you a little bit about all of the smart solutions and the programs that we're offering in conjunction, in many cases, with state-funded programs through NYSERDA. The moratorium is not, listen again, this is what I've spent 10 years of my life doing. I understand how people feel about it. I understand how people are confused and that they're concerned. This is not something that we undertook lightly, right? I am in the business, and the company is in the business of serving gas customers. And it's a gas distribution, it's a big part of our business. So we certainly didn't undertake this for any other reason than we absolutely had to. There was a concern about whether or not we could get the supplies from other parts of the country into this service area. One of the other, yeah, sorry. Do you want?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Please, finish.
It's fine.
We go back and forth.
It's fine.
Questions that I'd like you to hopefully answer,
Sure.
or one of you over the course of this is, when you estimate your load, how accurate does that have to be so that if someone's, I'm obviously ignorant in this issue, making up a number, if it's 200, it doesn't mean anything, but it's twice that or 3 times that, does that mean you're out of the box? How interruptible service, how efficient is that, and can it be scaled to a project like North 60, or for that matter, a project that's, if someone's developing something here in Newcastle, an old property, and we allow to raise, if we decide to zone higher buildings, that it can be servicing those. And if those folks did not have that load capacity now, because they're not gonna know if we change zoning, what happens to those projects 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road? Because can they then get the gas, even if they were using it now, can they not get it later because the load is changing and it's a bigger structure and it wasn't addressed currently? And then,
Okay, you're testing my memory here now. I'm on 3 questions. I want to make sure. Okay, go ahead.
and then just, do we recommend to a resident that may be turning off their gas if they're moving or changing the use of the property, that they shouldn't turn it off, they should be keeping it on and paying for it, so that they don't lose the right to have that gas in 3 months or a year from now?
Okay.
So I hit you up with a few, but I'll go back.
All right, so if I remember this correctly, so the question is around, the first question was around load, how accurate do they need to be? So we're gonna take applications until March 15th for firm gas, right? So that means that unless there is an operational leak, unless there's a gas leak, right, and I have to shut you off for safety reasons, that we're gonna serve you 365 days a year for all of your gas usage. The reality of it is that most people who are in this business can get a relatively accurate count, right? The reality of it is that you are probably, we're seeing overestimation rather than underestimation most of the time. And that's simply okay, right? We're just sort of looking at what's coming in. So there have been a number of things about when our customer is gonna know if they've been approved. We are approving everything that it comes in until Friday night. People have not necessarily gotten their what we call a ruling or their service determination back yet. That can take up to 30 days depending on the complexity of the project. But I want to be clear that projects that come in before Friday as a firm gas request will be approved. It is just going to be a matter of time, and it's going to take a couple weeks, and those people do report to me before they get the answer about what size service is it going to be, where is it going to be, et cetera. That's really a technical aspect rather than an approval part of it. Your second question was?
How
Yeah, so how does interruptible work? Okay, so.
how big you can scale it, really?
Yeah, so we have some of the largest customers that Coniston serves in the gas service territory are actually interruptible customers. University systems, hospitals, include multiple facilities, not just, a small like sort of emergency room, but large scale things in New York City. We have multi-hundred unit buildings, hotels, et cetera. So interruptible service can be scaled.
What's their alternate source? Oil?
So in New York City, generally right now, yes. And the reason for that is that a lot of them were oil customers when they started. They had some oil infrastructure in there. It is, again, not a requirement. And so someone who is undertaking interruptible today could be using an alternate energy source. So that, in New York City, there's nothing else other than oil. They can do geothermal. It's a little bit more difficult because they lack the space. And when you start trying to drill between the subways, the sewers, right, all of those things, it becomes difficult. Not impossible, because there have been, and we have had success with some very large, some very famous landmarks that have done it. But it is scalable, and you can use an alternative. That would mean oil, it could mean propane. But again, we want to be clear that we are not limiting their backup fuel to a fossil fuel, right? It can be something else. You just need to be able and capable of coming off the system the day we call you and say, we're sorry, we need you to come off. Again, that has averaged less than 10 days a year for the last couple of years. And it's all weather dependent, really. It's because that's what it comes down to. If you have a super cold streak, it might be a couple of days. If you have a winter like we've had this year, it's been fairly mild. We had some very extreme cold days, like on Martin Luther King weekend, but generally we haven't had too many interruptions. We had one, I've lost track of days, last week. But it's been a fairly mild winter, and so on the system, so people have just continued to burn, and they act essentially as firm customers. So the answer is you can scale it as big as you need to, and what will require a little bit of technical creativity will be on a non-fossil fuel backup, but it can be done from a technical perspective. So I've lost it. So
This
Very
was a local
question,
question.
yeah, was the zoning question. So let's say, for example, somebody
Okay.
has argument's sake, a 3,000 square foot building split between 2 apartments and a store, and now they can go up another story or 2 stories, so all of a sudden that becomes
Yeah, so-
6,000 square feet.
Yeah, so what we're doing, and it gets a little complicated, but essentially we're saying if you're a gas customer now, you can have equal to or less load for a repurpose, right? So I've had a number of buildings, for example, in New Rochelle. And I'm just gonna use New Rochelle as an example because it's the one that comes to mind because I just spoke to the developer this today. Customer had an existing load, and again, back to your point, it's in cubic feet per hour, right, had 1,000 cubic feet per hour per month, and they said, look, you know what, we really don't care about the hot water, but we wanna put in a restaurant, and we wanna redo some of the apartments, and we're gonna go up, we're adding 2 stories. And when we turned around, we said, okay, so the customer was allocated, right, that's what their previous use was 1,000 therms a month. And we said, okay, they came in and we said, well, you can repurpose that, that's what you've got. You can reuse it in any configuration you want. So back to one of the things about restaurants, right? Restaurants wanna come in, if there's gas service already there, and we know that gas service is important for commercial cooking, right? We understand that that's the preferred method for people who are chefs. I am not one, so I'm an expert at my microwave, but I understand that people who know how to cook actually wanna use gas. So those customers you can repurpose your gas. So you come in, and what we say to folks is to call us before you do that, right? Because you could go and
Let's
travel.
say it's 1,000 cubic feet, blah, 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 whatever it is.
Right.
The restaurant requires all 1,000, so everyone else has to be on electric or propane or
Or they'd have
oil?
to be on something else, yes. But basically what we're saying is you get to keep any gas that was used, but you can use it for a different purpose. So in that case, what they were
So if the load
doing.
increases in the house, they have to come up with
So
another.
here's the thing though, I will tell you that there's a lot of energy efficiency that can happen. And so you can do a lot of new gas equipment and just get the same efficiency. So it is possible. If you replace the boiler, you replace the hot water heater, you can do that and you can get efficiency out of it. You may not get a full load, right? If you went from a 1-story sort of, town sort of thing and you went and all of a sudden put a high rise in, no, it's not gonna work. But you could turn around and say, okay, I don't need the rest of the folks in the building don't need electric stoves, they don't need clothes dryers that are gas. I wanna have the gas for the restaurant, and that is possible to do. So you're gonna get allocated, every customer or every premise will get allocated the previous gas usage. To your point about homeowners.
The 3B, if someone
Yeah.
turns it off or wants to
Right.
have it in the future.
Yeah, so one, we're saying to those customers is, and that not only applies if you're selling your home, you sell your allocation with it. So you have a lovely home here in Chappaqua, right? You turn around and you wanna sell the home. The person who comes in says, yeah, I wanna keep the gas, no harm done. It's just a transfer of account ownership. Easy, very easy to do.
Yes, you do need to pay for it until
But
the
if
day
it-
that
so,
you
but if it's
transfer.
But what about vacant
vacant,
properties?
it's
Okay.
vacant now. That's
So
the question.
vacant properties or what we're calling rehabilitation of properties, right? Because that's another common thing in some of the older parts of the county. What we're saying is you can also have, as long as it hasn't been vacant for more than a couple of years. So that this way we're counting on that gas load. So if something has been vacant since 1983, I haven't been buying gas for it, I haven't been counting on that gas load, so the answer to that question would be no. However, if it's been vacant because the first homeowner or the
18 months, 2
18
years.
months, 2 years,
Do you have a guideline or is just?
we're saying 24 months. I mean, if it was slipped to 25 months, okay, but the reality is we're saying vacancies it would be around 2 years. Same with the rehabilitation. If you want to take the home down and put a new home up, again, you're going to keep your allocation. And the new equipment that you'd be putting in when you renovate a home will be far more efficient. So you could, in fact, actually add appliances, generally speaking. You could add appliances to a rehabilitated home.
Can I just ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I sort of read articles and various things, but maybe I need it explained to me in just sort of simple.
I'll do my best.
Okay. The moratorium, I think, took everybody by surprise. And I'm not sure, if it took Con Ed by surprise. And I'm not sure if the problem is.
That's what probably didn't take them by surprise.
I'm gonna answer that question for you,
By
yeah.
surprise, and I'm not sure if it's what I'm gonna call, the pipeline, which is, how you get it from point A to point B, and then to be distributed through local lines, or whether the local lines themselves have to be upgraded because of increased demand, like, in terms of the moratorium, what is actually driving this moratorium?
Okay, so let me answer the first part of your question, which is, Was it a surprise to us? It was a rapidly changing sort of dynamic. And the real issue for us was that historically, pipelines, and this is sort of an entry to your other answer, pipelines used to get approved when they were approved by the federal government. It was almost like, okay, stamp, you'd get a stamp, because the FERC, right, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, would go through the environmental impact statements, all the rest of the things, and then the state would approve them. That changed in the last few years. New York State does not automatically approve. And in fact, there have been projects that have been denied by state entities, regulatory entities, not the Public Service Commission. So let me be clear, the Public Service Commission, not that I need to defend them, but they are not responsible for approving pipelines.
Who does?
That would be it's a number of parties, but the DEC is one of them. And that was what the last project was denied under. It was denied under a water permit. So the answer to your question is there is plenty of supply. It is a matter of getting that supply. So there's plenty of natural gas. In fact, the United States is going to be an exporter of natural gas in a fairly quick time frame. There is plenty of gas. You cannot get the gas from where it is into New York State. So the answer to your question is it is not a local distribution problem. It is an interstate pipeline problem.
And is the interstate pipeline problem one that is specifically related to Westchester County rather than the whole state? Is this really a localized issue?
Yeah, so yes and no. There are supply constraints because no pipeline projects have been approved into New York State, period, in the last few years. However, the problem with, is that the moratorium area, the boundaries that we're talking about, that moratorium area is served by a single pipeline. Okay, so the pipeline comes out basically across the county. There is a map on Con.ed.com. It shows you where the.
Is it over by?
It's basically kind of it kind of like does like a sort of snaking through the dead center of the county. The pipeline is constrained, right? That we cannot get any more gas through that pipeline. So there's only two alternatives if you're talking about pipeline. It's to either push more gas through it, through what they call compression, or you have to build a bigger pipeline. And so neither of those are right now. There is developers who are the ones who actually build the pipelines have serious concerns about the climate and about whether or not they would get state approvals to do those projects.
Now, what are you doing to lobby? Are you doing anything to lobby to get more supply? Because to me, this seems ridiculous. If we're gonna start exporting gas, what's gonna happen realistically, geothermal energy is incredibly expensive to install. Solar, good, let's cut down all the trees so that we can have direct access for solar panels. And what's gonna happen is maybe a resident can do that, but certainly cities and town, I'm not ripping up our town again to now try to install geothermal so we can potentially revitalize our downtown and change our zoning. So to me, what's gonna happen is everyone is now gonna use oil again, which is gonna completely turn around a 180 what the governor is trying to do. And so I wanna know what Con Ed is doing to lobby to get a greater gas supply into Westchester.
Okay, so again, we're not the pipeline developers themselves, right?
But you have a big lobby, so I'd like to know what you're doing.
Okay, so what happens is that we have, the developers are aware that we would like additional pipeline capacity in. They are, frankly, they have had a really bad experience in this state. And so the reality of it is that they are not inclined to have stranded costs. One of the developers has had hundreds of millions of dollars in stranded costs into New York State because they started a pipeline project that did not continue to go forward. And so the reality of it is no matter how much, so there's gotta be two things. There has to be approval at the executive level through the regulatory agencies for pipeline projects that the company doesn't have control over. And then there has to be an interest, and there are lobbies on both sides, and there are a lot of people who are anti-pipeline.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're sort of caught in, and I think in all fairness to everyone, including everyone in this room, everyone in the Westchester County government, right? We are all sort of in the same thing, that we have folks who are on one side who are very adamantly opposed to pipeline projects and believe that we are now at a crossroads and we should be making the leap into 100% renewable at this juncture. And there are other folks who are turning around and who are really facing the economic realities, as you mentioned, about the cost of other things. But we have part of that commitment has been to fund through an extraordinary amount of money to fund these sort of clean energy alternatives that Chris is happy to talk about.
And I think we're looking forward to hearing about them, because from my perspective, I don't support additional pipeline solutions. I don't want to bring more natural gas into Westchester County, but I do want smart solutions that are really smart and can work.
And I come from a
for our
slightly
town.
different perspective, which is, you know, of all the sources of energy, oil is the least attractive. Well, coal, of course, but then oil. And that natural gas provides a level of stability, both in cost and in supply, to any kind of business or any kind of homeowner, and it's cheaper to run everything compared to oil. So there's like a whole slew of advantages, because you need that sort of stability in order to make investments in alternative sources. So my question to you is,
Smart
if there's going to be any kind of, so there's lobbying, which you have to do, but if there's kind of these impacts where, for example, if we rezone the downtown hamlet to allow for further development, that then becomes undevelopable because they can't have the energy to make it a reality, right? It's kind of like, you know, you're taking the retail woes that people are already experiencing, and you're not releasing the existing value that's within the property that's gonna support ultimately the tax base. So what I don't understand is, you know, you say it was not unforeseeable, you say they have all these problems, but all of a sudden this comes up and it becomes an issue. And what I don't really understand is, if we want to contact someone, to engage them and let them understand what the consequences are to the taxpayers in the state, where people are actually leaving faster than they're arriving, partly because of the tax base, that the taxpayers themselves are being creative but cannot execute. So is it the DEC? Is it like, you know, is it Cuomo? I mean, really, who is the crux of this decision-making for contact purposes?
So I think that one of the things that did happen, and your counsel was there at the public statement hearings, the Public Service Commission is taking that feedback. The feedback can continue. I know that you've communicated with them, with Kathleen Burgess, and that's gonna form, you know, that's gonna be the basis for a lot of things and conversations that are gonna need to go on at the state and local level.
So they're gonna be the arbiters of the size?
So again, the company doesn't have control over pipeline development, nor does it have control over the permits for those things. And so there are a number of agencies that are involved. It's not just DEC, right? There can be other parts of the state government that can intervene on that. And I certainly understand, I mean, from your perspective, right, not wanting to have pipelines, right? A lot of people don't feel that way. I also understand that for a lot of folks feels like it ends economic development. And it is cheap. And it does have, and gas has a lot of benefits to air quality, right? We've seen that. We've seen it in the county. White Plains was really sort of led the way in terms of banning heavy heating oil, and then the county followed suit. And we have seen significant air quality improvements in both New York City and in Westchester County from using natural gas. But we have a very polarizing sort of view of fossil fuels. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance those two needs. We're trying to balance saying I would love to be able to turn around and offer anyone in Westchester County the opportunity to convert to gas or to use gas. But I simply cannot get the supply in to do that anymore.
Is there a concern that in lieu of the pipeline that you'll have storage facilities for natural gas?
So the answer to that question is yes.
And the response then is Con Edison owns property in many municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
What power or ability does our municipality, or for that matter, Somers, Yonkers, it doesn't matter who it is, say, I don't want your huge, potentially dangerous, no matter what you tell me,
70,000 gallons.
facility, which is a huge tank nor do I want you trucking this explosive gas over my bridges and through my community. What power will we have to say, great, you are not giving us natural gas through the other mechanism or means, but now you're gonna give it to us through this means, which is arguably more dangerous, and ugly and disruptive, et cetera. If you can explain what the response is or our ability as a municipality to say, we don't want it here, and how you're gonna, the other piece of that, I'm sorry, I'm prone to asking
No,
multiple
go ahead.
questions, is how are you making the determination ultimately, if you go that route, to where to put these facilities?
Okay, so.
I'm sorry, that's both for liquefied gas as well as the organic waste too?
Yeah, the
Yes.
process.
Okay, so let me just talk to you about,
Have you thought about it yet?
so, and the answer is yes, and I'm gonna make Chris, like, actually speak for a bit.
Get some coffee and run and don't come back.
No, it's okay. So the answer to the question is, these trucked, CNG facilities, we do have one, a temporary one right now on Coniston property. That will be out in 2020.
Where?
Where is that?
It's in Ryan. And it's on Coniston owned property. It is, I know folks feel like, you know, I've heard them, right? I've read Twitter, right? People have had very, very, strong feelings about the trucks. The trucks are incredibly safe. We do have, and we have had for many years, longer, well, not almost longer than I've been alive, so it's really old. But there's a storage facility in New York City that is designed and incredibly safe. I wouldn't say it's pretty, but it is in a very industrial area, and so out of the view of folks. We are going to need to make up the delta between the supply we have and what we're taking on and just now, right? So the customers who are coming on these large projects and these economic development projects. And so the only way that we're going to be able to meet them in the short term is through a combination of energy efficiency, through these smart solutions, and through trucked in CNG, compressed natural gas.
How many do you have proposed, or you believe you'll need in the
Yeah, so
next
I don't,
2
Chris, if
years?
Chris wants to sort of talk to that.
And have you identified locations where you think you might want to put them? I guess those are the,
And to, also, I'd like you to answer his question, what does it mean, you know, what leeway does the municipality have to say we don't want it in our town?
So, I mean, again, you have legal rights, and your town council can probably speak to this more than I can. But the reality of it is, though, that if we don't have a combination of these things, that there are going to be customers who are not going to be served on gas. So back to the economic development part of this, that we need these solutions. If there is no way to bring that pipeline in, we need to have other solutions for the gas demand. It is simply, demand is up here and the supply is here, and until I bring them back into balance, I have a problem serving those customers.
So to paraphrase what you're trying not to say is that we would have no say
No,
at
I-
all, and if you need it in our town, that's where it's gonna be.
So, listen, the likelihood is that we're striving to put them in places that are largely industrial, manufacturing, right? That is and where we already have large gas pipeline that we could inject it into. That would be our preference, right? I don't wanna live, right? We just talked about the airport, right? I live near an airport myself, right? I don't wanna live I can certainly understand people not wanting the trucks, right? We've heard that. We've heard that people have said, I don't want the trucks coming in the neighborhood. I don't wanna see them every day. I don't wanna have this here. The reality is that they have to go someplace, but I think that we're unlikely to be citing them in the heart of a residential space. Like, that is not our goal. Our goal is to find them locations that will work, that are from an engineering perspective are able to work, and that are going to be the best possible neighbors in terms of where we site them.
I have two things to say. One is, would a potential site be an area where there's already Con Ed electrical grids? I think a lot of us are concerned about Millwood, which has, Con Ed owns a ton of land in Millwood. You have the electrical grids there, and we don't want to see a gas storage tank there
Okay.
near the electrical grids. I mean, is that something that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we have a gas line there. It has to go in an area that's going to be able to connect with our gas line. So it's not gonna go to a substation, that's an electrical
Well,
substation.
I don't think you guys would wanna have, liquefied natural gas, or whatever it is, by your power lines that service New York City.
But
Well,
the
we do.
bottom line is,
What?
it's
We
not,
already do.
yeah, we do, but it's not going to work if there's not a gas line for
Right,
it to
you need a
connect
gas,
to.
we need to be able to,
Got it.
we need to be able to inject the
Yes.
gas into
So
something.
then
well,
hopefully.
we were talking about trucks also, you could do it by trucks, we don't want trucks either, but
No, but even with the trucks that come in,
you still
when
need.
the system
The
is set
storage
up,
facility
it still
needs to be
has
near the injection
it
point.
still needs
Okay.
to be in an injection
Got
point
it.
for the
Part of the
gas.
reason we don't want these storage facilities is not only the safety and security concerns of our community, but it's frankly because we don't want to continue to have this reliance on fossil fuels. And frankly, I mean, part of what I think we're
that's your
frustrated about, it is my opinion, and part of what I think we're frustrated about, and part of what we made the appeal to the PSC on, is to push back this March 15th deadline, because we want to make sure that the smart solutions, and I'm excited to hear you speak about them, Chris, but we want to make sure that the smart solutions are up and running and that they're really smart solutions. And having a potentially 70,000 gallon liquid natural gas storage facility, whether it's sited in Newcastle or it's sited in Yonkers or it's sited in Rye, that's not a smart solution. And so, you know, I'm hoping that we're going to hear more from you today about actual workable
And he will,
smart
but
solutions.
can I just address, if pushing it back, all it does is add more customers onto a list of people who want natural gas, right? Like, you're not, by moving it out, you're making the problem actually worse, because then I have to have
I
more
get
and
that,
more
but
solutions.
on the other hand, I'm concerned when I hear you say that most of the applications that you've received so far are commercial applications. I'm curious whether the ratio of commercial to residential applications that you've received since you've called the moratorium, whether that matches your typical application rate, because I'm concerned that residents are being hurt by the moratorium because they just simply don't have the luxury and the availability of the kinds of consultants that developers have who are guiding them through this process and helping them to submit these applications. That's also part of the reason I think we were asking for the pushback.
So, just so we convert hundreds of homes every year in Westchester County. We do install hundreds more of what we're calling small, and when I mean commercial, I mean larger scale projects, right? Hotels, shopping areas, right? Larger employment sort of buildings. We have and continue to have customers applying for that. It is cyclical in terms of homeowners, simply because as the price of oil, propane, and gas fluctuate, that folks will turn around and say, and we've had people who've turned around just as you feel, that don't want fossil fuels in their homes, so have elected to do and spend money and to engage in tax incentives and everything else to divest themselves personally of fossil fuels. For other people, that is not necessarily financially viable for them at this time.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is to turn around and say, what's the expectation of end of life? And we're having conversations. That is why some of the programs that Chris is gonna talk about will help with that. But we're just pushing it back only makes the amount of gas that we need to procure, or the amount of energy efficiency we need to get, that much harder to achieve, right? So pushing it out doesn't solve the problem, it makes the problem that we have already worse.
But I think, Christine, and you and I have discussed this, I think it's a matter of equity as well, because
Yeah.
there's someone in Westchester County right now building a single-family home who doesn't know about the moratorium, and we're gonna finish April 16th, and we're gonna ask for a connection, and you've told me the answer to that is no. We're gonna
Correct.
have a ready-built house, and we're gonna have to find some other way to connect it.
Okay, but, and
And that's the concern we're trying to address with moving dates.
I understand that. So one of the things that we've done
Thank you, Councilman.
is we have contacted every single contractor that has done business with Con Edison in the last 3 years to tell them that this moratorium is coming. We have had multiple conversations. We have brought folks in from both the low-income housing market. We've brought in contractors, energy consultants, developers, plumbers, all sorts of folks to have that conversation with them. So while we're having these conversations tonight, I don't want you to think this is It's on you to have those conversations. So anyone, and let me.
It is.
We feel
Well,
like
it is, but I mean, I don't want you to think we haven't had those conversations,
You
because
made
we
the
have.
outreach to try and let as many people who are gonna be impacted know.
No, as possible.
But I have another question.
Sure.
Just again, just to get a background
Yeah,
question, because,
of course.
you know, I gotta keep it simple. Can you tell me what the capacity of the pipeline that has not been approved would have been to supply Westchester?
Yes.
And can you tell me, based on your current projections, because I know that you guys are a big company with lots of really good numerical people, can you give me a sense of, even if that pipeline had gone through, would we still be in a moratorium? Like, is there something more fundamental going on? Because,
I mean, the pipeline is not, I think we could all agree, there's no new pipelines
no,
that are coming.
I
So what do we
have a
to-
very specific question, and I'm asking for my own reasons, and I really would like to have the answer. So the pipeline that was not approved was.
So let me just be clear. The last pipeline that got approved in New York State was back in 2013.
Right, but you
So
had
there
a
is no,
pipeline on the table to Westchester County that I think was gonna go under the Hudson, right?
But it's not,
But that was not approved, so how much capacity?
I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer to that
it's also
question.
somewhat irrelevant.
Because
Excuse me, Rob.
Because we have,
Excuse me,
we
Rob, I
have
don't
real-
need you to pass
we have-
judgment
we
on a
have real-
question that I have a very
we have
specific reason for
supply
asking.
problems right
So-
now, and there's no new pipeline coming.
Excuse me, Rob, I have a question, I respect your questions, I do not pass judgment on them.
So let's-
I have a very
let's
good
deal
reason
with
for asking, so.
hypotheticals.
Okay, so the answer to the question is I can't provide you that answer. I can tell you that the last pipeline that got approved was in 2013. It was into lower New York City, to Manhattan specifically, and there has been no other pipeline that has been approved since then. To answer your question, I personally don't know, so I can't answer that question for
That's
you.
quite all right.
So let me ask you a quick question that has to deal with reality. If we have, you
Oh,
talked about,
Jesus
no,
Lord.
I'm talking about
Oh.
a builder, Hala, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about actual projects in the pipeline right now. I'm talking about, that's what I mean by reality. So when you mention you have the 2-year thing with somebody who, they turn the gas off of the house, and it's been 24 months or maybe 26, it's okay. My question is, let's say you have a developer who's building, let's say, I'll throw out a number, 91 townhomes. I don't know why I thought of that.
Set up
I don't know why I
your
thought of
question,
that.
but okay.
Why I thought of that number. Where? Now, the application's been, because we're talking about now, and I'm looking forward to hearing about the smart solutions, but we have a supply problem right now in the short term, right? And these smart solutions might be great, 5 years, 10 years, and we shouldn't want more pipelines, right? But we need supply now. We have a problem, and we don't want economic development to come to a screeching halt for the next 5 years. So let's say you have a development with 91 townhomes, and they've been working on getting their approvals, and they finally get their approvals through a very difficult town, and they start building, and lo and behold, it takes more than 24 months to complete the project from the time that you guys declared the moratorium and from when it finally gets done. Let's say that project, which somebody pumps in $20 million to build, not to mention all the soft costs and everything else, and it took them 36 months to get built. What happens then?
Okay, so one of the things that is fundamentally been a game changer with this moratorium is that most of the time, we were the last thought for development, right? So, because historically you never, and they're in developers' defense, they didn't have to worry about it, right? They would come in, they could do everything they need to do, and they could say, hey, listen, we're starting to show these homes, we're starting to show this hotel, whatever it is, we've got weddings booked in this facility. We need gas and we need electric, right? And we would turn around and say, okay, and we'd try and ramp through construction and everything else. The answer to that question is, if we got down to this point and they have not told us already that they need gas, that the reality of it is that they're going to have to find an alternative to gas.
Well, they
No,
know
that
they need
wasn't his
gas.
question.
My question is if it takes more than 24 months to complete the project.
So
They
the,
already put in an application, let's say it was approved,
Right.
yeah,
but
so,
it takes them longer than 24 months to build the project.
the answer to the question is, we are holding people to 24 months. And with that, the caveat there being that it is 24 months from the time they get their service determination or ruling. So that will mean for the most part, right, we're gonna have a number of people that will mean April of 2021. The reality of it is that we are holding to 24 months. Tim Cawley, our president, has been public about that, we've been public about that. However, we are not holding people responsible for what we're calling our own construction issues. And the reality of it is,
Can you define that? What do you mean by that?
so, anything that is on the company's responsibility to do, means, so pipeline, so the distribution piping in the street, the main work,
Right, so
the service lines,
So
all those
anything
things.
caused by your delay, they're
But
not
Yes.
getting
Now-
penalized
Can you
for.
request an extension, like
So
in college?
we are,
or not
the issue is we have not, there's no exception process right now. And the reason for that is because, again, we need to procure the gas for customers. And so unlike electric, we do not have, there's no state agency that turns around and buys gas for people.
But if you
We
know
have
the
to buy the
load,
gas.
if you know the load and you know what to expect, whether you get it in 24
Right.
months or 36 months is of no consequence. You actually have
Still
less you have to
procure
deal
it.
with for that 1 year, but it doesn't change the end game.
And they technically should have got their allocation already.
So I'm just gonna tell you right now, my answer to you is that we're gonna hold them to 24 months.
So this is a
That
Con
seems like a
Edison
miss.
policy.
Well, the
Sorry?
PSC could adopt a regulation that.
But it's,
Yeah,
as of now,
that
it's
sounds
not, so whose policy is that, right, so where's this policy coming from, Con Edison?
Con Edison.
It is based on what we believe can be constructed in the time, what meters can be set, and when we can procure the gas for.
Yeah, I think we've discussed before that we all wanna work together, right, because, and you're here.
And I will
unfortunately, standing up
certainly take your
But-
feelings back.
But, you know, when we, for example, had discussed, and other municipalities have, double pole legislation, which Con Edison doesn't want to see at all. And other municipalities have done it as well, and this is not to be taken out of context in terms of, if you do this, we do that. But we all work together as municipalities and a service provider. If our municipality and next door neighbor municipality and another municipality are going to have problems developing and have economic growth and have a tax base that can actually help establish and keep their communities going, there's going to be a consequence and there's gonna be ramification. And Con Edison is gonna have to hold in the bad, the Con Edison is gonna have to hold in the bad. Because I can't imagine, I hope the county would have the courage, if not this, well, maybe it won't come from the state, to say you can't just do this to what we rely on to keep our schools moving, to keep our communities moving forward too.
I
It's not
understand.
okay, it's not acceptable.
I understand that. What I can't do is I cannot buy more gas than I
But-
can
but
get.
that's not
Listen,
the
wait,
issue.
so let me stop you. So here's the reality of it is that I've made a commitment to the people, for anyone who applies between now and March 15th. And the truth is that we're gonna have people who are going to turn around and who are gonna say, yeah, we can't have them saying it's gonna be 5 years, 10 years from now, I wanna hold this gas, I want you to try and get this gas. There has to be a limit, and there has to be this, and so what we have done is we have looked at historically how long projects take from the time they notify Con Edison to the time that construction, until they're ready, and it has historically been 24 months for these projects.
They just
I
have
have
to be
two
interruptible
comments,
service
two
projects.
comments.
It's
First, there are
different-sized
different
projects.
types of projects. I'm building a house, I damn well better get that done within 2 years. Somebody building 91 townhouses who has to go through zoning approvals and everything else may take more than 2 years. Now, I think you should bring back, if they have already applied to you, you just said you've committed to them. If they're in the middle of building a project, you're gonna say, oh, 2 years are up, sorry, now you can't have it.
And-
All you've done, you've already committed to providing that gas. What you've actually done is gotten a pass and had to provide less than for the incremental time that it takes them to finish building. If they're in the middle of a project, I'm not talking about someone saying, let me apply now and maybe 10 years from now I'll build something. That makes sense, but if they're in the middle of building, to have you turn around and say, I'm sorry, it's gonna take 2 extra months, oops, sorry, you
And
can't
they-
have it.
So I will
They may
certainly.
rush it and there may
I've
be
gotta bring
safety
that
issues.
back.
I will certainly take that back. I will tell you, though, that we do have people where funding drops off, right? The other thing I want to be clear is we're keeping a waiting list of customers who are interested in gas, who have said to us, no way I can get this done by March 15th, right? And again, you are not obligated to have building permits. to apply for natural gas from the Coniston. I'm not interested, don't take this the wrong way, I'm not interested in those permits. That's between you and those projects. For me, I care about load and I care about your timeline. I will take that back.
The way I would word
Wait,
it
the other thing, I had two things
Okay.
in your multiple questions. So my other thing is that, as Mike Kaplan said, we are apparently the highest tax county in the nation. So now what you're doing is putting the onus on homeowners to now say, well, now not only are you paying the highest taxes, but now you have to figure out significantly more expensive solutions to get, energy to your home. And I would like to hear from Chris what kind of incentives you're gonna be offering to people, because you are disproportionately impacting the people who live in Westchester County, who already pay a disproportionate amount of taxes in the nation. Now you're asking us to pay significantly more to get that. I would have loved to have brought solar to my house. It was gonna cost me over $200,000 to have to redo my roof in order to hold that, to support a load. So I didn't do that. But now basically what you're saying is I either have to do that, or I have to spend it on geothermal, or frankly, I'm gonna go get an oil tank, which is not what you want. So
No,
I'd like to
yeah,
understand what the incentives
I
are
will
that you're
certainly
gonna
happy to
offer.
do that. Again, I would prefer not to be in this position either. I would have preferred that we had a continuous source of supply, that we could have extended this shift to 100% renewables out so that it was economically viable for people. That is not the situation we're in. And so the only thing that we can do, and again, this is our business, right? I have spent 10 years of my life every single day trying to do this so that I didn't have to have conversations with people, with homeowners like you, right? I didn't want to have to do that. The reality of it is we're spending a lot of effort and time on these smart solutions. I'm gonna let Chris talk about them now. And I'm not leaving, I'm not gonna run away. So if you got other questions that you can't answer, I'm happy to do that. But it is, we are in this, and there is nothing, we are trying to do everything we can. And that's why the Smart Solutions was filed in the first place, is to try and sit there and build that bridge between what has been a goal and what we do. And so this is sort of where we are, and it's not a situation the company wanted to be in, not a situation we wanted to be having these conversations, not just because they're difficult, but because there's an economic reality to them, as you mentioned, and so we're trying to build and bridge that gap for them.
I won't ask a question, I'm just gonna make a statement and ask.
There's someone out here who has a question, by the way.
That
Yeah,
He's had
question,
his hand raised for like 50
We
minutes.
see, we still have questions too, but thank you.
that question is, we ask if Con Edison would consider, any of you, or whoever you need to speak to, a sort of a hardship exception for developments that are undergoing and
Right.
ongoing, that to no fault of their own, but good cause, need an extension.
Right.
So some sort of good faith.
And you
Okay,
said
so let me, so
Just developers.
you said
No, but it
some.
could be big and small, it could be Toll Brothers, or it could be.
You said some projects drop, financing, there's a lot of reasons why projects get delayed. But if you have a project, and this is a continuation of Jeremy's point, if you have a project that's going in good faith, they're trying to beat it under the gun, and the load has already been calculated, and it comes in, it comes in at 28, 30 months, and they've done nothing wrong, they didn't lose finance, they didn't lose anything.
So
That's unfair.
we'll certainly take that back. So I'll commit to you that I will have that conversation. I'll have that conversation with our senior leadership team, okay?
Rob,
We
did you have a
should write a
conversation
letter
for her,
about that.
Smart Solutions? Yeah, I agree.
Put it in the paper, Martin.
What?
You come here by the microphone,
It's an
yes.
issue.
No, the room is better than it used to be, as far as speaking anywhere, but
It's,
nevertheless.
Go ahead,
Just
no, go
real
ahead.
quick question.
Sorry.
So if I understand correctly, it's Tennessee across White Plains
Correct.
and Algonquin up
Algonquin
top.
is much further north, yes.
And basically, everybody who's on Algonquin got a pass,
Okay, so,
right?
well,
No.
it's, because it's a separate pipeline and it's not pipeline constrained. Go ahead.
We're just because Newcastle is the line, right? In Yorktown, there's nothing, right? They're not being constrained. Is Newcastle the edge?
some
Yorktown is not.
municipalities, what were the municipalities?
So I'm trying to
Yes.
understand.
Not
I'm
yet.
trying to understand,
Yeah.
and I guess what I read was that it's because we're taking up the Tennessee, and there's not enough capacity up the Tennessee.
Simply put, yes.
And Algonquin has capacity. So
Okay. Yes, to an extent. So is there another part of that question? Because I can describe to you the reason why there's the moratorium lines. Go
Because,
ahead.
well, and part of that too is, there's like the Tennessee lines, can you identify a line in the ground, say this is a Tennessee line, and this is an Algonquin line, or is that kind of amorphous and kind of made up?
No.
I have a second question. but
Okay,
is
go ahead.
it-
So go ahead. Why don't you ask your second question? Because I'll remember that.
That's fine, okay.
It's getting late, but I think I might be able to remember that one.
The other question is, I know in terms of, your ability to satisfy customers, you're concerned with the firm amount of gas you can get your
Right, on a
contracts
peak day.
for. My question would be for you is, how much of the gas that comes out of the Tennessee or the Algonquin actually goes to the utilities, and how much is out to, and I'm a capitalist, is out to other speculators, financial players, where they're trying to be that much more profitable kind of a person who sends the gas where they can get the most money, as opposed to what you're doing, which is supposed to be not making any money at all on the purchase and sale of gas.
Okay, so,
You
yes, I
understand
got
what I'm
it,
asking?
yes, I
Okay.
do, I think. Don't go far. You can sit down, but don't go that far.
Actually,
So,
we prefer if he goes far.
oh, you would, okay, sorry. You gotta go sit on the other side. All right, so first, to answer your question is, yes, what we're calling the most populated part of Westchester County, right? Most of Westchester County is served by Tennessee. The northernmost part is served by Algonquin. Both pipelines are supply, right? That's where we get the supply of gas in. Algonquin is not constrained for one, because they're at the northernmost part of the county. There is simply not the number of customers, and then is simply not the demands from Algonquin. One of the other questions that comes up, though, is then why don't you just go tap into Algonquin and bring it down? So there's two parts to that question and answer. One is that by the time it's about 15 miles to get it to where it would need to be. That would require, again, pipeline permits, which Ivy has been clear she doesn't want, right? And it would be a considerable amount of money, and by the time we actually got it down, we would tap out the capacity. So basically, we would be building a pipeline to nowhere, is essentially what would happen. So that's not economically viable for us, for the pipelines, for our customers.
But my question was more specific.
So the question is about, is there like a map that with like, okay, I'm on 123 Beach Street and you're on 146 Apple Lane? The answer is no, but what we did is we turned around and said, where does the pipeline serve on a peak day? Which pipeline is serving customers, and that's where we drew the moratorium line, okay? So that the folks who are not, what we're calling this unaffected area, are served by Algonquin. The rest of it is folks are being served on a peak day by Tennessee. And that's what we're talking about, it's a peak day.
Because it seems to be on this edge here, so to speak, seems to be like a tough draw. Maybe that's just our lot in life, but
It's unfortunate, but yes. So we didn't, it wasn't an arbitrary, like, oh, it wasn't me with a crayon drawing a
I'm not
line.
enough of an engineer to comment on it.
So, your second question, now I've
Capitalist
forgotten.
question.
Yeah, the
My
capitalist
second
one.
question was, how much of the capacity of both
Yeah,
Algonquin
okay,
and
so
Tennessee-
would you indulge me in a 2-minute sort of lesson on gas capacity?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna use this in a very simple way, so don't be offended, right? I have to explain this to a lot of other people and who might not have the sophistication, so I have simplified.
Don't overestimate our sophistication.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna give you buying gas 101, okay? So everyone's familiar with the Broadway play Hamilton, right? Okay, so I'm gonna use this as an example. I tend to try to use sports analogies, but as I'm not really a big sports fan, it kind of goes off track a little bit. Sorry, so let's imagine that you have 10 people in your family, right? So it's you and your spouse, your partner, your lover, whatever. And 8 members of your family decide that they're gonna come in and you're gonna host them in your house, in your lovely home, and then they'd like you to schlep them down into Manhattan so that you can go see the Broadway hit Hamilton. Okay, so your first thing you do is you turn around and you say, I'm gonna go call the ticket office, right? call the ticket office and they say, ha ha ha, and when they're done laughing at you, they say, okay, look, you can buy, you're allowed to buy 4 tickets. Okay, great. So now you've got your partner, your lover, your spouse, whatever, your mom, maybe your mom is your favorite person, and you say, great, I've got tickets for me, my mom, and 2 other people. You still have 6 other people who are sitting in your house, right, and sitting on your couch, and you've got to get them. So now what do? You say, I'm 6 tickets short. So what you do is you go out on StubHub, right, or you go out and try and buy them in the market. And that's essentially what happens. So what we're looking at is the tickets would you buy from the Broadway theater itself as your gas capacity contracts. StubHub is what we call delivered services, right? So you go out and you can say, okay, I might pay a little bit more for them. I buy them from other parties that have purchased gas along that pipeline. I go out and I do that. So now I'm up to 8 tickets. Great. So the reality though is I'm still 2 tickets short, and this is what happens. So I have 2 options there. I can either say to them, sorry, you're gonna stay home and play with the dog, and we'll come back and we'll bring you a cookie. Or I can turn around to them and I can find them another alternative. And that's essentially what Smart Solutions is. Smart Solutions is the Lion King of this scenario, right? A really good plan.
Lion King is
The Lion King happens to be a fabulous play.
I thought that was, I understand all the examples of what you did.
Okay.
Okay, you used the 4, and the 2.
Yes.
But you didn't answer the question I asked.
Okay.
So what
Your
was the
question is,
The question is, out of those Hamilton tickets, let's say there's 1,000 in
Yeah, so-
how many is Con Ed?
we buy as much as we can contractually
I'm
get.
gonna ask the same question again. How many of the 1,000 tickets does Con Ed buy, and how many are out there on StubHub or in the secondary markets for other, scalpers to make a lot more money off?
So the
Can't
answer
do
to
the
that
same
question is it
pipeline.
changes,
Can't
and
do the same
the company contracts for as much pipeline capacity as it can buy,
But I'm still asking,
and it's the only answer I can give you.
well, maybe you don't know. It's not an insult, but I'm saying is that I would think that the number 1 priority for that pipeline should be for the utilities and the general population.
Okay, and again,
Listen,
we're buying.
It hurts me to say this
They
too,
don't
but
control the pipeline. It's your question, it's a good question, but it should be directed at whoever controls the
Right,
pipeline.
there's only 400 seats in the theater, we can't
You have to have the
have
that conversation about whether or not pipelines are allowed to sell to somebody else is way outside the scope of Con Edison's. We're a customer
I know,
of the pipeline.
I know that Con Ed can't control the pipeline. You don't own the pipeline. I get
I
that.
don't own the pipeline.
But I would expect that Con Ed knows exactly what percentage of the pipeline they do get.
Yeah, and by the way, the pipeline doesn't end in Westchester County. The pipeline continues.
All these questions I know, okay, but I'm still not.
You're so, and I'm not,
And not the other utilities buying.
there are other utilities buying,
Not just Con Ed,
and so the answer to the question is you need to address that to the pipeline.
Yeah.
We're not the only ones on the pipeline, Rob. So other
Why
people
is it
will-
only
No, but I
affecting
think
us
it's a
then?
legitimate question. It's an
Yeah, if
absolutely
we're not the only
legitimate
ones on the
question.
pipeline, why is Westchester the only one affected? If you're saying it continues
Take another shot
south,
later.
why isn't it affecting New York City or any
Because
other-
we're buying all of the gas we can contractually buy.
I
All
think
of the
it's a
gas
very
we can get.
legitimate question.
You
Rob,
can't
I-
increase the shared services.
Rob, that was a good question. Thank you for bringing
Delivered
that up.
Thank you.
But why can't you increase the contractual amount? You can't increase the contractual amount? There's no way to do that?
There is a limit, the pipeline is as big as the pipeline is. They have contractual obligations, they are meeting those contractual obligations. You cannot Con Edison is buying all of the gas it can buy to serve the load it can buy. There are contracts out for the rest of the pipeline. That is, and the pipeline in and of itself, because it cannot make itself bigger, and because it cannot compress, because it cannot get permits to do so, is limited, and that is where we are. And the reality of it is that the rest of, there are a lot of pipelines in this thing that don't have the same demand, right? They have demand, but they don't have the same amount of demand as we do here in the New York area.
So the pipeline that goes south, if you're not imposing a moratorium on those people, is it because like it's NYSEG is covering it, or there are other providers that are
So-
getting more
So,
gas allocation?
so let me,
Otherwise, I don't understand why we're the only ones getting a moratorium.
So this is where the supply constraint is, because we have an incredible amount of demand and we have a limited amount of supply. They're not in balance. So the reality of it is that pipeline constraints exist throughout New York State. National Grid has been very clear that they are in a position, in a very similar position for downstate, which includes Nassau, Suffolk, and New York City, the counties that they serve. There is a moratorium in Lansing and Tompkins County, New York. There are moratoriums in Massachusetts. This is it's not limited to Westchester County. It wasn't like we said, oh, let's go pick the place where we would, this wasn't a personal thing. This was a literal physical limitation on the amount of supply we can get into this county.
Okay, and just so we're,
Forward to the smart solution.
Yes.
but just so we're clear, I am sure that you're getting as much gas as you possibly can get from these pipelines, but I think the transparency on that information is really important for people to have. There are going to be winners and losers in this. And I think that people who make decisions on this, who are advocates who make decisions on this, need to have that information in order to advocate for their constituents the best way possible.
All right, thank you so much. We really
Wait
appreciate
a
you
minute,
answering all the
before you go,
questions.
Chuck, are you the one who was raising your hand? Do you have a question
No,
specifically?
no.
No, it's Rob.
It was Rob Fleischer.
Okay, so we have Chris.
So my name's
Rapp.
Christopher Rapp. I work in customer energy solutions at Con Edison, and I feel a little bit like Russell Crowe in the Gladiator movie. I've been sitting off to the side watching Christine, and so interesting to be here now. What I'd really like to talk to you about is the Smart Solutions portfolio that we put forward in front of the Public Service Commission, and as Christine has said, this was our attempt, recognizing that developing pipelines has been very challenging in New York State. This was our attempt at using other techniques to try to meet peak day load and head off a moratorium. And unfortunately, the volume of smart solutions that we got was not enough to avoid the moratorium, but it still provides value, and so we put it in front of the Public Service Commission and asked for them to fund it. And on February 7th, they said, okay, we'll fund it. Within that portfolio, kind of four main categories: energy efficiency, heating electrification, so those are heat pumps, renewable natural gas, and trucked LNG and CNG supplies. And so I can kind of like tick through those in order, and maybe I'll start with some of the easier ones. So energy efficiency, we have some large targeted energy efficiency programs that we're going to be rolling out very soon, focusing in Westchester County to try to bring down the load. And so there we're working with market partners who we're already working with them in other parts of our service territory, and we're saying we're going to pay you additional money if you can go and get customers in Westchester to install energy efficiency measures, things like high efficiency boilers, putting more insulation in your houses, anything that will bring down gas load. And we're hoping to roll those out within kind of the next 4 to 6 weeks.
What do you project that impact to be percentage-wise? Have you thought about that?
Right, no one's going to give up their gas.
No, we're not. No, energy efficiency is not asking them to give up their gas, but just to replace their current appliances that are using gas with appliances that are more efficient.
Are you giving customers money to do that?
Yes.
Have you analyzed what you think that percentage drop in load will be as a result of that, if successful?
Percentage drop. So it, let me give you it in a different form. For every 10 customers that we get to go to a more efficient furnace, we can add kind of one new room on the pipeline to serve one more customer as a result of those. Because it's a 10%.
But you must have analyzed what you think your success will be.
The number, I don't think I have the number. Let me see if I have the number.
And the reason why I asked that is because one thing we discussed before at a prior meeting was moratorium is a good word, but this may not really be a moratorium, but this is the new reality going forward.
Which is what happened in Lansing.
Right, so that's why I asked that question.
I'm just kind of looking up the number that we had for energy efficiency.
Right, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it's.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to change the need for the moratorium, but it's going to reduce.
Or the revocation of the moratorium.
Yep.
Are you going to target certain houses? Like, I get something from Con Ed telling me about my electricity usage compared to neighbors. So you're going to be able to look at somebody's house and say, hey, you got a 3,000 square foot house, you're using gas, and your numbers are too high. And therefore, hey, here's a program that you may be interested in.
They
Are
have-
you gonna be able to target those?
They have
do that on the
absolutely
electric
no
side, yeah.
comparison to houses in the immediate area. So I think they take like a zip code, and if somebody's got, you're in an area where there's 650 square foot apartments and you're in a 3,000 square foot house, you basically are using 4 times as much energy. That's about as crude a tool as it is.
I'm talking about comparing 3,000 square foot houses to each other.
It's not immediate.
Are you
think
gonna
Con Ed has a
target
comment
the
on
worst
that.
offender?
So
Exactly, which is,
Sure,
I
sorry,
get that letter every month.
So I
everybody gets
I do
that
to hear
letter.
you. I hate to interject, poor Chris, I feel like I'm like cutting you off, are you okay? The answer to my question is, yes, it is a general thing, it doesn't include the 5,000 square foot, it sort of tries to normalize. As AMI meters come out, there will be gas AMI meters.
Smart.
It's a smart
It's
meter.
the smart meter, the ones that talk back. And so as that rollout happens and continues to happen, that data will get better. And so what will happen is that you can actually inform then people to turn around and say, look, your gas usage is like much higher, maybe, and to your point, maybe this is the time for you to think about replacing your 28-year-old boiler, replace that clothes dryer that's been, that you inherited from the prior owner, whatever it is. Start insulating. Those kinds of things will become more and more apparent as we work through those technology solutions. But there is also, Chris has got the whole, there's a whole energy efficiency piece to sort of try and move that forward beyond what
Targeting.
is ridiculous, and I will fully admit to, is a really kind of useless piece of information right now. It will get considerably better. It's really just sort of the first step to kind of get people into that mindset of comparing themselves. That's what the intent of it is for.
Unfortunately, it's numbed the
Yeah, I know-
user.
I know.
It's like actually had a backward effect, which is Con Ed doesn't understand a thing about.
No, so I feel
And
the
you
same
will-
way. I was like, how can I be less efficient than my next closest neighbor is like, she's 90. I don't even know that she's like, uses electricity, right? So you're right. It's not a fair comparison. I'm not home.
Right, it's.
So
Yeah, and you will have, Westchester County will have all their smart meters in place by the end of this year.
And I think it actually needs to be tied into the assessment data and basically what utilities that you're pulling energy for. So somebody on a well is gonna have a much higher electrical usage than
So
somebody
that's
who's
that
on a water
report.
main.
I agree with
And
you
there,
on
and there
that
will,
report.
and again, not to think, but we're doing a lot of things around the digital customer experience to sort of improve that and to be able to target and personalize information. That is part of our ongoing plan, separate apart
I
from
was
this.
very excited when it first came out until I realized it was completely useless.
Chris, when you roll out the energy efficiencies, will you be communicating that information to the municipalities, to the building departments, so that can be shared by the local governments to the residents and by the local governments to those who come in for permits?
So all the energy efficiency companies that we'll be working with will have customer outreach plans, and I believe those will be including things like outreach to the municipalities and the towns to let them know that, those opportunities are there.
Okay, I think if those are at the forefront of the outreach, that would be beneficial.
Okay, good.
They should be
That's good
seen as
feedback.
partners in trying to get this information out to the residents.
Yeah, we could even have like a fair, like a exhibition or
Come to
fair or
community
something,
day.
yeah, something like that to
Yep.
get people together and
So
learn
that's
about
one
this stuff.
aspect, the energy efficiency in 4 to 6 weeks. What's the second part of it?
So heat pumps, and we have funding for 10,000 heat pumps in our non-pipeline solutions portfolio, both geothermal and air source heat pumps. So geothermal, I think you seem to have a fairly good understanding of that. Air source heat pumps work similar to geothermal, but instead of exchanging heat with earth, they're exchanging heat from the environment. It's basically an air conditioner that on cold days can pull heat out of cold air, which is pretty impressive technology. And so we're going to be providing capital contributions towards customers that decide to install those types of technologies. And they will then become either partly or fully electric customers, and will be able to take that load, whatever the fuel was that was supporting it beforehand, oil or natural gas, and serve it through electric.
So what do you think your average contribution to a home would be?
So, are you talking about a geothermal or a?
Like geothermal, for instance, that's gonna cost someone $20,000 to $30,000 to put in,
So the number is actually even a little bit higher than
Yeah,
that.
I know, I was actually making that low, but.
The starting
what are
number
you
is
gonna
around
give
40.
Right, what are you gonna
And
give an
NYSERDA
average
today
house?
offers them around kind of $6,000 to $8,000 to get that cost down.
Okay,
We'd
so
be
that's
offering
not-
an additional kind of $5,000. And for geothermal, there's also a 30% tax credit. And so the goal there is to get kind of down to the $20,000 neighborhood. And just remember that when you're on geothermal, those are very, very efficient systems. And so your operating costs over the lifetime of those systems are gonna be less than they would have been if you were on fuel oil. And so our goal is to get customers to where they have kind of a 5 to 7 year payback compared to fuel oil.
Which is like it was with solar.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of
realistically-
the benchmark is 5 to 7 years.
And if, that's what a resident is gonna use, like I wanna put that in, it's gonna cost me, let's say, $40,000. But if we want to rezone our downtown and you're trying to do that now for buildings, that's gonna be significantly more expensive. So is it still gonna be the same kind of $6,000 you're giving?
No, so the incentives will be on a kind of per thermal ton basis. So thermal tons is the way the HVAC engineers describe the size of the system. So, for example, if we provide an incentive of $2,500 per thermal ton for a residential house, that could be a 4-ton system. That's about $10,000 in total. So that includes both the NYSERDA and the Con Edison incentive. But for a commercial entity, that number might be quite a bit larger, but it all is driven by the number of heating and cooling tons that they
Is there a
need to
cap
install.
on the number of these that you're gonna do per year?
We're gonna try to avoid having a cap, and we had, the Public Service Commission approved about $220 million. So our goal is to try to satisfy as many of those, customers who are interested in geothermal as we can.
It seems to me, and I don't know much about this, but and we address this in our letter, it seems to me that the residential component can have more gas save. They're the better market to focus on, to cut their gas usage with some of your incentives, and then maybe the additional gas can go towards the commercial usages. So then you don't have the worry about, commercial stagnation. And you know what I'm saying? So like, it just seems like if there's a give and take with the residential versus the commercial, focusing on the residential so that the commercial can grow and increase the tax base and jobs and things like that.
So just to be clear, even with the smart solutions, including some of the things that you like and some of the things you don't, like truck supplies and so forth, we're still not gonna have enough gas to get out of the moratorium. At some point in the future, even if we didn't get another pipeline, we can imagine a day where we convert enough customers to electrified heating or do enough energy efficiency, so we come down below the level of the pipeline and can serve new customers again. That day is probably a long way off, so.
So can you answer, maybe walk us through, and what would be the example of a smart solution for a new restaurant that comes in after the moratorium? What would be the new source of heat or energy for a 100-unit development that comes in after the moratorium, or a mixed-use development?
So for mixed-use developments, I think geothermal is a great solution, and geothermal is a challenge to retrofit for existing homes, but I think is a lot easier to do for a new development because you're in construction mode already. Maybe you have the place where the wells are gonna be bored into is, bare because you're gonna start construction. So easy to start drilling those geothermal systems before you put the building up. And there's also economies of scale if you're building this system kind of new as opposed to trying to retrofit it. So I think that's a good solution for a multifamily type
In a
building.
restaurant that comes into an existing building?
And there's no gas available.
Right.
Right, so induction cooktops, if you, hop on an airplane and fly to Copenhagen, you will see a lot of commercial restaurants that use induction cooktops. And they're actually kind of impressive technology. It's a little bit different. I think maybe you're a chef. It's pretty incredible how quickly you can boil a pot of pasta water with an induction cooktop and good control as well.
You mentioned this technology runs on electric.
Yes.
So what percentage then, breaking this down, do you expect will be changed over to electric? Because then you have to fuel that electric and find out how you're going to supply that demand. So is that a clean fuel? What is the percentage? What will that do to everyone's costs?
So today, the state's portfolio of generators is about 70% conventional and 30% renewable. So about 30% of the electricity that we're using today comes from things like wind and solar and hydro.
So then what percentage, though, do you believe will be transferred or changed to electric? Because that'll certainly impact those numbers you just gave.
Sorry, what percentage of
What percentage of the new technology, because it's all really electric-based, correct?
Right. Yep,
So
pretty
then,
much.
assuming that you are successful in getting people to change over, what percentage of that, how will that increase the percentage of electric use is really the end question. Is it gonna go up 20%, 2%, 5% for Westchester County?
More like 2% than 20%, at least in the near term. And like I said, we have funding for doing 10,000 heat pumps. Those are primarily focused on residential customers. So basically, I think there's something like 300,000 customers in Westchester, electric customers.
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
so if you can think about, kind of 300,000 customers, 10,000 of them converting over to electricity.
Single
It's not going to be a massive increase in electric usage. And also, just to kind of keep in mind that we're a summer peaking utility, that means that the times when electric usage is at its maximum is in the summertime. In the wintertime, we have significant room on the wires to bring more electricity to customers. So our expectation is that we won't have to build additional generation or additional infrastructure, wires and poles and so forth to bring the electricity to the customers in order to provide heating for them.
Caveat with that there might be some exceptions for some developments for local, right? So there might need to be a few more poles, but we're not talking about
If everybody
generation
at a
stations.
cul-de-sac converts to geothermal, then that cul-de-sac is going to be using more electricity in the wintertime, and so you might have to do some upgrades to transformers.
Some local reinforcement.
Right, it's kind of like the EVs. If everybody on your block gets a Tesla, then there's going to be more electric usage. You might have to make some investments there. Yeah, should I stop now? Because the trucks.
No, we're really anxious to talk about truck supplies.
I wants to talk about it.
We all want to talk about that. I don't see how that's like an
It's our
alternative
opportunity
energy
for you to
source.
educate us.
Gassed in,
Okay.
that's gas, like.
I'll do my best. So another part of the smart solutions is trucked CNG and LNG supplies, and we tried to be kind of technology agnostic when we went out and solicited these solutions from the marketplace, and we were open to getting CNG and LNG trucks, and we did get some good proposals, some relatively cost-effective proposals, and we would like to move forward with those proposals. Those are going to be very important, as Christine said, to meeting the peak day heating load. We do not have specific sites picked out yet. We're going to be working with third-party companies that do the trucking of the CNG and the LNG, working with them to develop sites. And then the PSC order that allowed us to move forward on smart solutions generally said, you should work with the communities where these types of facilities would be located. And so that's our intent too, is we would be working with communities where the facilities would be located. They need to be near high-pressure gas mains, so that's very important. They also need to be basically zoned appropriately for this type of use, so that means an industrial or commercial type situation. And they also need to be able to be accessed by, fairly large trucks, kind of
Can you tell them,
gasoline-sized
does that exist
trucks.
here in Newcastle? Do you know off the top of your head if we have those types
We're gonna
of?
have the pipe.
I can't say
Yeah, the pipe.
anything jumps to the forefront of my head
We
right away.
we should confirm, can you look and tell us what infrastructure we have that could support this? Like a pipe, as our community representative, could you let us know? Or maybe you could tell us we have no infrastructure.
No. So there's pipes. I don't know if you have
Transmission.
Transmission
a good-
lines, yeah.
Right, but I don't know that you have a good location to the
I don't think
gas,
we
to
do.
the gas.
We
No,
don't.
we definitely
Yeah.
don't. We don't, and I don't think you need.
Leave it
to-
at that. Don't waste your time. Go to
Exactly.
another.
We do not have
No,
a
you
good
have
place
to
for it.
it has to be the combination.
Have a number of things.
There's a number of things that come into,
It has to be pipe that can handle, has high pressure, right? It cannot be, it's not gonna go into low pressure. It has gotta be in a place that we can site the equipment to inject in, which means that you need back to Chris's point, you need some space.
The bottom line, if you don't have it, I don't need to hear about it. I mean, that's
That's it,
disrespectful. If you don't have it, it's great.
I know a town that does have it. It starts with R. I'm not gonna say anything, but
So let me be clear, Rye is a temporary facility,
I was joking, but.
and I know, I'm just letting you know,
Just
I want
I
to
just picked a letter.
reiterate for the record, Rye is a temporary facility.
So we'll be moving forward with our efforts to cite the
I can't
CNG
believe
and
it.
LNG.
I still am a
so.
state of shock that this is actually happening. I mean,
We gotta
really.
get past that.
So is there Smart Solutions Phase 2? I mean, because.
We will be issuing another RFP for more, and this one will focus on demand-side solutions. We're not going to be out looking for more truck supplies. If that makes you feel any better, so.
We're only on 3 now, anyway.
Yeah.
Still have 1 more to go.
Nope, so
Yeah, so the last one is renewable natural gas. So these are anaerobic digesters where you take food waste and other organic material, cook it up in a lovely stew, and from that you can harvest natural gas. I've actually visited facilities like this, and they're pretty incredible. You can stand right next to them, and it does not smell bad or anything like that. It is also an industrial facility, so that would also require kind of appropriate zoning, and we'd also have to work with the local community to get that zoned. But it's not like huge piles of rotting garbage. It's a pretty scientific and industrial process.
Well, we're doing composting here, so
Yeah,
if you
it's
guys,
methane
if
gas.
you guys want to pick up our food waste
No.
and bring it someplace to make some energy.
So the anaerobic system,
Yes.
is that a proven solution at this point?
It's a high-cost solution compared to conventional natural gas. Our hope is that eventually those costs come down. But today, it's, kind of like 3 or 4 times the cost of conventional natural
Where
gas.
taxes come from.
But it's a source of supply that we thought was worth investigating, and so we included it in the portfolio.
Makes
Doesn't that
sense.
require a pipeline though, eventually?
It requires that you be able to attach it to either a pipeline or to the local distribution system, and in our case, we'd be attaching it to the local distribution system and just distributing it kind of that way, so.
I think we have a question.
Thanks, Chris. One thing we haven't mentioned, although it's come up briefly, is compressor capabilities or expansion of compressor stations to increase capacity, add more seats to the theater, if you will. Are there proposals on that front as well? I know approvals are an issue, but are you entertaining those?
So I'll take a shot at this one.
Yeah.
So there's no compression opportunities on our own system that would bring more supply to Westchester. The compression opportunities that exist would be on the interstate pipelines, and even those require permits in order to get built. We are investigating with our pipeline partners opportunities to do those types of projects. One of the kind of nice things about those types of projects is they're relatively faster to develop, and so we're kind of thinking hard about those types of.
What about microcompressors on the local sort of Con Ed network?
Yeah, it still doesn't help. It's, really, if you kind of draw a circle around the Westchester Moratorium area, it's the gas that's coming into that circle that is in short supply because of the capacity constraint. So microcompressors inside that circle doesn't help bring more supply into the inside of the circle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was 4 things.
So that was 4 things. I think I promised you 4 things, so. I will say that, there is kind of a 5th thing out there, which is we continue to interact with the pipeline development community. So we have not said we're not going to do any more pipelines. We feel like it's the prudent thing to do to investigate all of the options that we have at hand, including some that are less popular with some people and more popular with others. So that's kind of our overall strategy.
Thank you.
So now we just need to educate the public so they can take advantage of some of these smart solutions, and we'll work with you any way we can.
And get the permits in the
We have
next 2 days.
we have an e-newsletter, we have a lot of different ways to educate the residents and.
Appreciate that.
So let me pitch for Christopher here for a minute. There is a lot of information that is on the Con.ed.com natural gas moratorium site. There are a lot of links. Chris has a really good relationship with NYSERDA, and so one of the things that we intend to do, and Chris will do a sort of similar thing next week, is we're going to start having some webinars for developers and for varying levels of sort of understanding that Chris is going to speak to. and hopefully we'll have some NYSERDA information, if not even directly NYSERDA participation. Certainly, Jane is here for you to do anything that you need, and obviously, at any time we need, you ask us to come back, we'd be happy to come back, I promise. And that's where, and we're just gonna continue to do that, and so we will continue to have these discussions. It's not a Friday comes and you're on your own, right? This is our partnership, these are our customers, right? Whether they are no longer gonna be gas customers or won't be gas customers in the future, they're still our customers, and we are not going to abandon people. We will continue to be available and working with them.
Thank you.
I think you can tell by the volume of questions that we asked tonight that this is an issue that we're very interested in. And I mean, thank you both for being here and for responding to all of our questions and for sticking with us through all of this. I hope you would walk away with the appreciation for the fact that Newcastle is a community that prides ourselves on being environmentally friendly. We have a sustainability advisory board. I would invite you guys to come and present to them and perhaps allow them to bring members of the public in to learn more about this as well. But I think in the comments that we submitted to the PSC on the moratorium, we were quite clear that we want to be a leading community. We want to be a model community. So to the extent that you're working on clean energy solutions, we want to be your partners in that. So, I hope that tonight doesn't sort of scare you away from the potential partnership
not
with
at
us
all.
moving forward.
And
because
listen,
it's something we're all interested
as I consider myself an environmentalist, and not necessarily maybe that we always agree on the way to save the planet, but I am with you, and I appreciate the passion for it, and certainly we have made that commitment that we are going to help get there, right? We do a lot of things internally. The smart solutions are a really big, important part of getting there. And so, and as Chris mentioned, we're gonna do this again. So I think that we hear you. I wanna, thank you for, it sounds sort of self-serving, but the fact of the matter is having this feedback does help, right? It's important to know that we've got people who are going to turn around and say, yeah, we're gonna support these kinds of things. It's important to our community. So I appreciate the time that you've given us tonight to let us have these conversations with you.
Also, I just started one more option. We have a mailing that's going out, right? When does our water mailing go out?
Around the first or second week in May.
So,
Hopefully first week.
we're always looking for things to put in the mailing.
And
Should be careful what you offer, yeah, we might take you up on that.
We
We
can
have
do
a one-page sheet.
We need that by mid-April.
Mid-April?
We can certainly, and we can certainly through Jane,
Yeah, we can get.
How
can
often
get
do
you
you
that
send that?
information.
That's the
That's
water
just a
bill?
once a year.
Required once a year to
It's
send
more
out.
quality
Okay.
report.
So we try to stuff as much in the envelope as possible.
okay, we can, we.
So not, we have to be reasonable.
Like a
you
one-
can give, we can
brochure.
use links, right, so.
Yeah, exactly.
So that we can do.
We can
Exactly.
do a one-pager that
That'd be
gives a
perfect.
lot of contact information that they can go to our website. There's a lot of
Double-sided.
information.
Right, that'd
And
be
Jane,
great.
And it will keep growing as things keep developing.
Right.
Yeah, and I would really urge, Con Ed to find additional smart solutions that really our residents and developers can actually use and utilize, because my real concern is that this is gonna completely backfire and everyone's gonna just go to oil. A lot of people are gonna go to oil simply because it's cost prohibitive right now to do some of the alternatives. So I would really urge you to go a lot further than you have in figuring out smart solutions and how we can bring those to your customers in a cost-efficient manner.
I think we should be, if it hasn't come across here, it's not like we're stopping at this point. We have no intention of stopping. We're working internally, we're working with the PSC, we're working with NYSERDA
Right.
to
I
try to
just
keep
think-
bring more.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we
table.
appreciate that. I just think we've kind of looked before, this is the first time we heard what you said, we kind of were briefed on it before. But I don't know that it's going even remotely far enough, and I personally, I don't think it's, no offense, I don't think it's that helpful. Because the gas, the trucked in gas is the same thing. And, the other solutions I think are so minimal at this point with the number of people you can help provide them to, and they're so cost prohibitive that I don't see them being utilized significantly, so I think it has to go leaps and bounds further than it is if this is gonna be at all doable.
I think also, though, industry is going to catch on to the rebates and the tax incentives, and they're going to be pushing it, and I think capitalism, it's going to,
I'm afraid
it's gonna
that the
do its
tax
thing.
incentives that they've got in place right now have not been as aggressive as they were even a few years ago when there was only a limited adoption. So I think the history, as Lisa says, kind of proves the point that this is not aggressive enough either on a tax rebate front or in a dollar volume. I mean, it's really out of reach for most middle-class people.
So one thing to be mindful of is the incentives, is those are federal incentives, and those are scheduled to
Maybe New
sunset
York State
in
needs to
3
like-
years.
yeah,
Maybe they do.
exactly. Absolutely.
Maybe New York State should do something there. I will say, kind of going to the idea that capitalism will step up here. Talking to the folks in the geothermal and the air source heat pump industry, unfortunately, because this is not the goal of the moratorium, but they see the moratorium as a real testing ground for their ability to step up and provide real solutions to customers. So a lot of those companies are thinking about making investments in Westchester, kind of, setting up installation shops and hiring employees to do this kind of work, so.
Many of them publicly traded.
Thank you very much. The hardship exception, I think, is critical, especially for this and other communities that are developing. It's critical. We have a development coming, whether you're Summit Greenfield, Toll Brothers, or a regular homeowner, it's important, good faith, hardship exception.
Yeah.
So.
And we'll certainly, I promise you that we will take that back and we'll have that discussion.
Pinky promise?
I promise.
If you need more input on that, we're happy to provide it.
I was not a Girl Scout, so I can't do the Girl
you
Scout
can do
moves,
it.
but whatever, yeah, I promise.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you for having me.
And also, thank you for withstanding the heat and
Yeah, you did a heck of a job.
it's not easy to come here and to explain the moratorium to communities that are not happy about it.
No, we're happy to be here.
Thank you.
Promise?
Right, so,
Jeremy, he's got vodka in that water bottle.
It's water,
yeah. All right, so we don't need to do the announcement.
No, it's fine.
So, I will just say one announcement. We have the citizen preparedness thing. It's tomorrow, March 13th, 6 o'clock, Westchester County Center. It's a 2-hour training course for residents that have the tools and resources to prepare for any type of disaster, respond accordingly, and recover as quickly as possible to pre-disaster conditions. That's tomorrow at the Westchester County Center. And now we have public comment. I know that's probably some people here for public comment. So if you have public comment, anybody? Nobody here for public comment, so we'll move on. Did you comment already? Then you remember.
I asked a question for somebody who was going to leave, and I was trying to be polite. So just a couple additional facts on the airport. Unfortunately, Aviva has left, and Aviva, I want to put on the record, has been very helpful, and she's been a good resource from the county that's working with the Airport Advisory Board, and she should be commended on that. So we do appreciate her. In terms of the issues that Mike was speaking about, in terms of, we don't know what it is, I think when you look at the numbers at the airports, even what they've given us to date, I think we do know what it is. I think we've seen the transient operations, both the corporate operations and the light GA operations, have really spiked up tremendously in the past 4 or 5 years. I think, I forget the exact timeframe, but the corporate transient operations are up 33%, up by 20,000. Like, it used to be 60, I think, and 4 years ago it was 80 in 2017.
I'm sorry, what does that mean, corporate transient
Those
operations?
are, think about those as all the big jets, the net jets of the world, all the private operators that aren't smaller, and they're not based here. They come in, they pick somebody up, and they fly away.
When you say they went up from 60 to 80, these are percentages?
60,000 operations a year
Okay.
to 80,000 operations a year.
But these are also not just private jets. I mean, these are like Uber-type
Right.
airlines. Like, you could reserve a seat on a plane, on a private jet. You're not renting the whole jet.
So, right, and there are two types of, some like NetJets, they don't rent out by the seat. You rent out the whole jet.
All right.
But there are other operations, things like a lot of the shuttles, like Tradewinds, like Cape Air, like Blade, like JetSmarter. There are a couple others, you know, that we actually buy individual seats, and they've really gone up too, and their operations have really peaked up. You know, during the summer, especially on the weekends, Cape Air and Tradewinds fly many flights over to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard and lots of other, you know, vacation type places that people are buying individual seats on, but they're 8-seater planes, so they kind of don't have to operate out of the terminal, and that's kind of their way of kind of getting around some of the rules. It also is their way of getting around security, which is another big risk. And I think there are a lot of people, in the last meeting we had, were very concerned about the fact that 85% of the flights that come out of the airport, which are private, we're not sure what, if any, security measures. You think about how long it takes to get through the TSA, and it's done for a reason, but nobody's really paid attention to the private side. And that's a concern, so I think that's an ongoing focus of what we're trying to find out about and kind of make sure it's an issue that's being addressed at the
Are you
airport.
speaking about the work at the Airport Advisory Board or on our local committee?
That was at the Airport Advisory Board, that question came up, and when push came to shove, they said there really isn't any kind of mandated security screening. I guess there's some things they're supposed to do, but I'm not aware that anybody's checking. And people I've talked to over there say there really isn't a lot of security at all. And there've been some incidents, JetSmarter, at a plane where somebody got on and they had to take it down right away because somebody was threatening to kill everybody on board. I think he was really drunk. He had a lot of problems. But, you know, I don't think that person would have gotten past the security screening at the TSA. And that's concerning.
They don't need a terminal either. These,
No.
they just need a hangar.
They all fly out of the FBOs. So some of them fly out of Millionaire, some fly out of Russ West. I forget which one. I think Wheels Up flies out of Signature. So, you know, they get around the terminal use kind of
Right,
restrictions.
exactly. They're getting around both those things.
Which is a big problem. Also, there have been some discussions about, you know, how do we pay for all these things that we need at the airport? There was a conversation, I guess yesterday they approved, they were paving the runway. And nobody is suggesting that we do anything that would create an unsafe situation at the airport. One of the key, I think, discussion points was by taking money from the FAA, we kind of tie ourselves to the FAA. And we wanted to know what ability we have to fund a lot of the operations at the airport without taking money from the FAA. Because you can't make good decisions if you don't have good information. And one of the things we do know, and it's being discussed right now, and I appreciate the county opening the discussion and taking feedback, is that the fees that we charge here in Westchester are much, like 2 to 5 times less than what they charge over Teterboro. And this is a much more attractive, you know, logistically, place to fly in and out of. Much closer to New York City, much closer to Stamford and Greenwich, you know, all of Westchester. We should be at a premium, if anything, so at least we shouldn't be less than them in any way. And we also issue a lot of waivers. And so one of the things we asked for was, you know, a more accurate look of how we're charging for those fees, and we're still waiting for that. But I think, you know, hopefully the relationship between an AAB that is now in there since last June, where I think it was a shock to the system for both the county, people who worked at the county for a long time, all of a sudden have not a hand-picked crew, you know, by the former county executive, to people who are asking a lot of questions, like I do of you sometimes, you know, to have people who are a lot more intense than me, sitting there asking a lot of questions when you're used to not having this at all for the past, you know, umpteen years, is kind of a shock to the system. And I think we're getting to a better working relationship now with the county and trying to get more things done by not pushing quite as hard. And hopefully we find, you know, a nice medium where we can make some progress. But, you know, at the same time, it was 50 degrees and sunny out, you know, on Monday, and it's going to be warm weather here pretty soon. And it's discouraging to think about the fact that as warm weather comes, the winds are going to shift, and that's going to lead to, you know, to some of these issues again. And I posted something, I think I'm not sure if I sent it to all of you, or to any of you, but, you know, Sunday night at 7 o'clock, between 7 and 7:30, 10 planes came through. That's not a great way to end your weekend. You know, so, we need solutions sooner rather than later. And this is a time actually where George, I think, has some bandwidth. There's always something going on, obviously, but it's not an election year. So I know it's an election year for the Board of Legislatures, but it's always an election year for the Board of Legislatures. So it's a time where hopefully things can get done.
Rob, so what are the things that we're looking to get done? When you say that we're hoping that this year solutions can move forward, what specifically
Well, I
are
think
the
we want to
solutions
see
that
massive.
we can be advocating for?
I think, it's not clear to me why we haven't had the master plan move faster. If you think about how we sent that letter back, in I guess October, or
11th.
whatever date it was, and every meeting we ask, what's the progress, and we're still waiting. I think it's also important that once they take all the comments, that we get another look before they kind of adapt, that RFP.
We may not get that, but
Right,
yeah.
but
yeah,
because
right.
to submitted all these comments, but lots of people, I'm sure lots of people did submit comments. It would be unfortunate.
Though they didn't have a very long timeline in which to submit them,
Right,
if I recall.
it would be unfortunate if all of a sudden, the final thing comes out and there's no word, and you didn't get what you wanted. I think that, so hopefully that does happen. I think that's an important conversation to see happen. The other part is we're still looking for information. You talk about, I'm not sure how quickly the county's gonna spend the money and to hire the outside experts. We'd like them to have a dedicated lawyer who knows this stuff flat. It's very complicated. We spoke to somebody here at a certain point in time, and that person is now involved in a different lawsuit
He
against the
actually
county.
advised us not to retain his services, if my recollection
Yeah.
shows me right, not as an
Well,
individual
I think
entity,
if you,
municipality.
he said, his quote that I remember writing down was that 80% of these solutions fix themselves politically, and 20% go through the legal system, and those don't work.
Right, but either way, he said it shouldn't be a one
shouldn't be a
lick by
one
Newcastle.
Right, well, it's not equitable, for sure. No, I'm not talking about us hiring. We'd like the county to hire a dedicated,
Right.
high-end, because we have questions all the time at different levels, even at the Airport Advisory Board, that are very technical. I don't know the answers. And I don't think the members of the Board of Legislatures have the expertise to answer those questions either, just like you would have to go.
Both have the same issue with that word.
Legislator?
Legislators and legislatures.
The fact is, there's a pot of money to do it.
Right, and the other day, they talked about how much money is left. We're still trying to get financials from the airport as well, which I think, once again, should be transparent. And I'm not sure why I think as a new group has come in that's asked a lot of questions, they're hesitant, it's created kind of a defensive reflex.
And that's a request that's come from the AAB, not from local.
Right, from the, look, we could foil them, but I think when we get to the point where the AAB has to start foiling information,
Right, and
that's not a good situation.
Right.
If we're working against, we want to work with the county, we don't want to work against the county. So,
Does Aviva have any pull to get you that information? Like, why
She's
would
kind of
she
the
do it?
conduit, and there are a number of people that are sent there. Susan Spears, Spears? I can't remember. Spear, sorry. Susan Spear, as well as somebody who's involved in that, the head of the public work. There are a lot of people from the county who come to these meetings. So, look, at the end of the day, George, I think, needs to make these decisions and let them do certain things. And while he's saying all the right things, we still need a little bit more on the action side.
Let's not forget, we have a senator who's running for president, too.
Well, I've never seen either one of our senators, so I don't know what they look like, other than what they look like on
We
TV.
had the meeting with her staff. I'm actually having a meeting with her staff again in 2 weeks. Not for airport issues, but we certainly could bring up airport issues.
And then the last thing, that they mentioned about, like, if a plane doesn't fly over a certain area, it flies over somebody else. Well, at some level, if you have an airport that services the entire county, there should be some level of equitable distribution of the flight paths. And to have them all go down, and on an increasing basis, go down, right down to a certain very small width of land, and while everybody's enjoying the benefits of the, look, I like flying at Westchester Airport if I have to fly, I get that. But given that it's 85% non-public, and a very tiny portion of the public is getting the real heat of it, including our school right here, and this town hall, which makes me uncomfortable, that isn't equitable. it's almost like if they'd done the gas moratorium, but just, had like a 1 mile wide kind of area, you're not gonna get gas. So I don't think that's really fair. And I think the equitable distribution, I have no problem telling somebody in a neighboring town, you're gonna bear some of this burden. And I don't think the county should have a problem saying that either. If we decide as a county we don't want an airport, that's a separate discussion. I think we do want an airport, and we all have to bear some of the burden.
No, the airport's not going anywhere.
Thanks.
I mean, I
Thank
do think that we heard tonight, right, that Mike invited and Aviva invited us, or invited Rob to come potentially to a round table and have a discussion of those issues. He said sort of similar to the kinds of discussions you've been involved in on sewers. So I think we should follow up and make sure that
Yeah,
that happens.
I can't speak to the conversations that were had on sewers and.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, like.
We've had a number of
Yeah,
meetings on
yeah.
sewers and, and we've gotten stuff done. And actually, we do have a solution, even though Mike didn't mention it, but I think this point was that we would have the same type of discussions about the airport.
No, and I'm very hopeful that, that Georgia will come back here again this April.
But we're saying bring it to them, not.
No, but I understand, but I hope that he'll also come back here and listen to the public again, because I think that's important for him to do. And he'll also do that not just here, but down in Pleasantville and down in Armonk, and the areas that are really deeply affected, and also south of the airport as well. So I think it's important for him to keep hearing that. Because there are some people also out there who think that the idea that there are people being affected is a myth, it's a hoax. And it's being driven by a couple of people making lots of phone calls. But the reality is that there are a lot of people who I know of in this community who didn't want to even come here tonight because they don't want to have their faces put up next to this issue. Because they're either trying to sell their house or they don't want their house devalued. And there are people who really don't want their names associated with it. I look at it from a holistic perspective as the whole community is impacted, which I don't think is fair.
We also need to see some action. We don't need, I think the public engagement is great and the forums and listening to people, but we need some actions. And quite honestly, the only action we've seen are noise monitors. We need action.
And the noise monitors serve a small purpose, but not really much of a purpose at all. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Cynthia, did you have a public comment?
Yes. So Cynthia Manicherian from Glendale Road in western Newcastle. I want to thank you for the well monitoring meeting that the town planner hosted last week. It was very productive. It was very productive to have the town hydrologist as well at the meeting, and I want to thank you, Ivy, for attending the meeting. And I thought the biggest piece of information to come out of the meeting is the fact that there are 79 wells that are considered by the town to be part of this hydrofracture zone that could be impacted by the development and expansion of Sunshine. I wanted to emphasize that because a lot of people are accusing my husband and me of being NIMBY, and I'm very disappointed with that. I don't do Facebook, but I do get all sorts of random people copying Facebook posts and sending them to me. And I want you to know, Mr. Greenstein, that it's not at all about being NIMBY. It's about.
I'd never said NIMBY.
I will
You'll
continue.
never see a post from me that mentioned anything about NIMBY.
No,
Never.
that's an anachronism for a broader context of,
I actually
quotes.
just want to stop you for 1 second. I actually think NIMBY is important because the people who live closest to a development are the ones who are aware of the issues going on and perhaps things that need to be considered rather than people who aren't there. So I actually think it's not
That's a lovely way to
necessarily
look
a
at
bad
it,
thing.
but in the public eye, it's got a pejorative meaning
Yeah,
to
but I
it,
think
so,
if you
but
think
thank you.
about it, it's not so
So I
bad.
do feel that these 79 well owners and a broader part of Greater Teatown, we are the boots on the ground, we really do see what's going on. We understand how our community functions and when it functions well or poorly. And that is why we were advocating all this time for a much deeper dive into the consequences of this project. I wanted to dispel you of the notion of the wealthy few It's a very diverse socioeconomic community in the west end of Newcastle. I'm proud to live there, and there are wonderful people there, and of all stripes who care about the outcome of this project and care about the value of their homes and care about the children and so forth and so on. So part of those concerns are for the kids. And it's not only about the water, it's about the safety, it's about the access, it's about the fact that they currently are living in a war zone where now there's discussion about blasting to take place, and blasting company calling nearby neighbors to say, we'd be happy to come to your home and review a before on the status of your home so that we can compare it in case there are any blasting effects during the blasting process for after, if they do blast. But these kids are living on site. We care about that as a community. I can't imagine why the town is permitting that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
You know, whenever you speak about water, and I saw you holding the Examiner before, and
Yeah, I just was handed that, I had
there's
no
an article
idea.
in there, I guess it's one of two-part series about Mark Weingarten, and
About him?
well, but it's about him with the Sunshine Home, and he had an interesting comment in there, because I too read the article before the meeting, and it has to do with the water, and it has to do with the safety of the kids. And as you know more than anybody, this town board has not ever been involved in this project. The one time we touched this project, and it wasn't this town board, it was 3 town boards ago, was actually looking into bringing water to the Sunshine Home for the goal of the health of the kids, and for, Hala, and for increasing the fire protection. And that was shot down. And here's the thing. People could argue about the water district and this or that, but at the end of the day, there's a pipe 1,000 feet away from the Sunshine Children's Home. And if people truly care about the children, and I'm not saying you don't, but if people truly care about the health and welfare of those children, not just with the quality of the water, but also with fire safety, then what I've never understood, and forget about how it's done with the water district, because that's the process, and the process can be changed. But right now, today, as I'm sitting here talking,
Right.
there is a water line of municipal water 1,000 feet away from the Sunshine Home. So what I still to this day don't understand is if people are truly concerned about the health and welfare of the kids in the Sunshine Home, and again, and fire safety, why isn't anybody pushing for water connection to that Ossining line and doing it the perfect way that you guys think is acceptable as far as water districts and no water districts? But why isn't anybody pushing for water connection to that line?
Well, we
That's
know
the
that,
part
we
that I
know
still
that
don't
you
understand.
did push for that water connection and tried to slip through
Okay,
a water
Hala,
district in an intermunicipal
I'm still
agreement
waiting
with
for an
Ossining.
answer to the question.
It is absolutely irrelevant, and it's absolutely
Absolutely
not listening to
irrelevant?
the point that she is making.
No, I'm
Which
absolutely-
is, there
it's-
has never been a full environmental review of this
Okay.
project when there's 79 people of all walks of life, rich and poor,
It has nothing,
old
I'm
and
asking,
young,
I'm
who are
asking a
going to be
different question.
impacted
We're
by
past
this.
that already.
And you're
We're
just
past that.
pushing the
Hala,
water district
Hala,
rather than
please, 'cause
listening to what
you're
she
the
has to say.
Five town board members.
Five
thought
town board members.
Before you got on this board and shut it down.
But
let me ask you,
it was
my
not what was
question-
described to me by the head of our Department of Public
My
Works,
question
and what the
remains.
document
Okay,
actually
my
said did not
question
reflect it.
remains. My question remains. Putting aside the process, and I don't mind repeating it because it's so important. I'll repeat it 10,000 times. Putting aside the
Why
process.
can't we make a
putting
special
aside the
exception and
process-
create a water
putting
district
aside-
for one
okay,
customer, which
putting
is
aside-
explicitly illegal in New York
Putting aside
State,
the process,
which is
putting
why it was
aside
tried
the
to be done that
process,
way.
thank you, Hala. Putting aside the process about how we get there, so it's perfectly legal and everybody's happy and there's
Putting
no
that aside, the
complaints.
process.
Putting aside, because here we are today.
environmental
Here we are
impact
today,
statement.
Hala, please. Here we are today, March 12, 2019, okay? Lawsuits have all been, there's some still pending, they're all done for the most part.
They're mostly pending.
I understand, but here we are,
Don't
March 12th.
say they're mostly done.
Okay,
They're
March
mostly
12th,
pending.
2019. Here we are today. And if we truly care
Right.
about the protection of the water quality of the kids in that Sunshine Home and fire protection, Why isn't anybody putting pressure on the Ossining, who has a municipal water line 1,000 feet from the Sunshine Home? Again, I'm not talking about looking
It's an
back. I'm
obfuscation
talking about
question.
right, it's not an obfuscation, because I'm talking about going forward. We could
Why
start
doesn't
working on that.
Sunshine
We
Home
could start
put in a
working on that
radiant
tomorrow.
filtration system
We
into
could
their
work on that
existing water
tomorrow.
supply?
You tell me, Cynthia.
Why don't they do that?
Cynthia,
They're the ones who are
Paula,
responsible.
please, I'm talking to Cynthia. You tell me, Cynthia, Rob, help me get water connected to Sunshine Home, and I will do that. You tell me, Rob, this is the proper way to
I'll
do
tell
it,
you-
and I will do that.
I'll tell you that actually it's a very, very complex project, and it's not only about the water. You guys have a code that follows the water, so that's something that we can bring to you that is of serious concern. But, March 3rd, 2017, we had a disaster of a situation with a late winter storm that knocked out every single road into the greater Teton area. I have the maps, I have the tan emails of everybody saying, my road is down, my road is down, my road is down. These kids are sitting in the woods where you guys don't see them. You have no idea what's going on that site. And the way they're sitting in the woods is because you gave them all sorts of special permits to be exempt. I'm sorry, very important permit to be on a state or county road for these, as you call them, the sickest of the sick. They have no business being in the woods, hidden from public view. They really don't. Why are they there? That to me is a catastrophe.
When you say they, it wasn't actually us,
the-
it was the ZBA. And I'm not saying,
Pre-existing
I
hospital.
understand, but I'm not blaming the
Very long
ZBA.
You have a fiduciary responsibility for these kids and every single resident of your town to stay safe and to plan for it and to have the oversight over your different boards if there's a serious problem. If you have an active shooter go into one of your high schools, what's going to happen? That's not your problem. It's going to be the planning department figuring out how to provide
It's a
better
horrible
safety.
example.
No,
You
we
should
actually-
never make an
Horrible.
example.
I
We actually
worry
have
about
police
the
at our
kids
schools
next
because of
door. It's no different.
But
They
then,
are lost in the woods. You do not understand that.
why not bring
I do
municipal?
understand.
You do not.
I've been, why
Why
how
not
do
bring
you know I
municipal,
don't
why not bring
understand
municipal
that?
water
I've
to them
been
if it's 1,000 feet away?
That is only one of many issues. Do you know how I got involved in this at the very beginning? I didn't even realize what was going on. But in my home, when I rebuilt, I put in a nuclear fallout shelter because you can be concerned about gas being brought into, Millwood and stored in Millwood. But we all have to also deal with a nuclear power plant, which thank God is going to be shut down. But it's not like they can move those radioactive rods anymore, the spent rods or anything. I put that in my home. When I asked at the ZBA, where is their emergency either shelter on site or evacuation plan, I've never seen it. Have you? Have you?
The
Do you
answer
worry
is,
about that?
here's the thing.
Because we do in
The
Greater
application
Teton.
was never, I'm not gonna claim to know as much about this project as you, because this application was never before us, but that still doesn't solve the main issue. Well, I may not, I can't
you
propose,
pick on
I
one
can't propose,
issue. I pick
because
on
I'm picking
all
on the
the
main, I'm
issues.
picking on the main issue.
not the
And if
main
we're talking
issue.
about the
There are many
safety of the
main
children,
issues.
if we're talking about the health and welfare of the children, I can't tell you that I can solve every single problem. But if we're talking about water,
No,
okay?
you're talking about water.
I am talking about water, because that's been the issue that has been driving this
So
project.
I'm here
And
to
you're talking about
correct
wells
you.
too.
I'm here to
There's
correct
no
you,
reason
to
why-
thank you for
You should
the well
connect to the
monitoring
municipal
meeting. But I
Ossining water
want you
supply.
to know, that all of the back and forths about how this community is a small group of people who just live to pester the next door neighbor and the attorney and don't care about the kids, you are really dreadfully wrong. Okay? And it will be horrible if the woods go up in flames, and that's not just a question of getting, hose water. This is vast woodland, okay? And it will be horrible if we have some sort of emergency where these kids need to shelter in place. I'll guarantee you their new plan has no such provision for sheltering them properly in place. It will be horrible to try to figure out how to get them out of the woods to safety if they need to be gotten out of the woods. And you, the town, I'll correct, doesn't understand that. However, I wanted to make it clear that the meeting last week was very productive, and it only emphasizes, it's not like 5 wells around in Cedar Lane Park, well, who cares about town of Austining anyway? It's 79 wells. If you had 79 hookups to municipal water in Chappaqua, you guys would be going crazy about issues for those 79 homes.
But you could, if you hook up the Sunshine Home, all those 79
It's
people.
not your water,
Yes,
it's
I am
not
back,
your
I am
water
back,
to
I am
give.
back on that again. I just don't, it's not my water to give, you're right, 100%. But the part that I still don't understand is why the people who are so concerned about the water and fire safety are not asking Austining, whose water it is to give, why aren't you letting them hook up to your water supply when it's
And
1,000
I
feet
say again,
away?
why doesn't the owners of Sunshine Home put in a radiation filtration system, as they said they would to the zoning
Yes,
board,
that's
to
still
solve the
not in
problem?
place.
You see, it
And I
tends.
think, and I will tell you, if the way the process worked, you had 14 homeowners, including one of them which, a single mega user, 13 little tiny ones, one person lived 300 feet straight up from the connection, and she was included in the water district. Now, there was no way she'd ever be able to tap into that pipeline. It was an artificially created district to the benefit of one user that all the other people within that district would have to pay for. It was tried to slide through. You say, no, it wasn't, we discussed it with Austining. Well, no one in Austining knows about it and denies it to this day.
I'm not.
And I think.
Okay, listen, we
And
don't
I'll
need,
tell-
to go
I'm
back,
sorry.
even though we have
We are
documentary
going
evidence.
back in time because you're bringing this
Because
up.
I'm talking about going
You're bringing
forward.
this up.
I'm talking
No,
about going
you're
forward.
trying-
We're not
You were
being
trying to go
productive.
Why are we
back
going
and give
forward right
another
now?
benefit
All
to the
three-
developer.
everyone, we're not being
The same
productive
way
anymore.
going and putting this in front of the
We're not
zoning
being
board.
productive
What
anymore.
benefit?
planning
There,
board.
listen, I got news for
We're
you.
not
Here's a
being
secret.
productive anymore.
Sunshine
I don't care.
Home, Sunshine Home,
I don't care.
listen, Sunshine Home is gonna be expanded, and you still have the opportunity to connect to municipal water. Not only will it solve your well issues, but it will be for the better of the safety and welfare of the children, which everybody says they care about. Now, we can look back and try to say there's problems with the process, or we can say today is March 12th, 2019, and let's commit right now, today, to reach out to Austining and solve the problem of this
I
water.
cannot commit to that.
Why do
That's on
you-
your conscience.
Why do you
Yeah.
think that we have any control over Austining?
Because here's the situation, you haven't even asked, and then when it comes, when somebody like
I
us,
don't need to ask,
when
I'm not
somebody
the
like,
government.
when somebody like, you see,
And
here's the
why
thing.
isn't, and I believe, shouldn't it be the job, in the way for following process, shouldn't it be the job of the Sunshine Home to petition Austining? Not necessarily our job to solve their problem?
Okay, listen, 1,000,
I
listen.
mean, this is like crazy.
No,
This
it's
is
not.
like, hello,
It's
what can we do for you?
It's
but
not, it's
screw
not
all the other
crazy.
79
It's not, what's
neighbors?
crazy is the fact that there's a municipal water line 1,000 feet away.
I'm sorry, but
and
it's their
nobody's
job
putting
to
pressure on
petition for the water
Austining
that they
to
want,
connect.
not our
The
job.
pressure should be on Austining. Why
No,
aren't you
their
connecting
job
them
should
to
be
their
petition-
well?
no,
That's not.
That's not the issue.
Guys,
Okay. We can frame it any way you want, but let's
We're all going
keep
in
it real
circles.
here,
We're
people.
all going in
Let's
circles.
keep it real. 1,000
Let's keep it
feet
real.
from a municipal water
I
line.
think we've all made our points.
Let's keep it real
Let's
here.
keep it real, and
In
let's not play
keeping it-
favorites
in
for
keeping
developers
it
at the
real,
expense of taxpayers.
In keeping
At the
it,
expense of children who are sick.
At the expense
Guys,
of
I think
taxpayers.
we've all
Okay, we're
established our
moving on.
position.
And the Millwood Fire Department, which supports it.
no,
Oh,
they don't.
please,
In
let's
fact, I've
stop.
been to
Actually,
the
we have a
meeting.
letter that says they do. I'll be happy to share it tomorrow.
Good, why
Okay,
don't you?
That would be great.
That would be
Okay.
so wonderful.
Got it.
Let's send it. Let's see what the date on it is.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's the
Obviously, it wasn't during your
October
time.
2015 letter, that letter doesn't support it.
So you don't think
But
connecting them
that-
to the
It's
water
irrelevant.
system?
Stop, we're going,
I'm not
guys,
here.
we're going in circles.
I mean, is that
Let's
seriously an
support it.
argument?
But
You
you
don't
feel
think it's gonna
sensitive
help with
about
fire
this, Rob?
safety?
Can we
Yeah, I
can
think we
move
need to- I
forward?
think
I mean,
we
we're
need
just,
to
it's
move
just.
forward.
On water.
I'm focusing on water because that's
Yeah,
gonna
and I would
focus.
like
Because
to
that's
move
what he
forward
wants to
now at
do.
this time.
Because that's the
Yeah.
focus, because I'm willing to
Move forward?
help solve
You're
the
willing-
problem that everybody's been
Yeah,
talking about
whether
for 4
it's by
years.
the rules or not by the
The three
rules.
of us would
I'll
like to
do it
move this
any way that's by the
conversation
And
rules.
see,
forward.
exactly. Say that again?
Lisa and
So
I.
you have to have, well, then you
Say that again?
make a motion to move a and public comment and move on, that's what you want to do.
I mean, instead of, is there another, this is
You've
not
never
trying to be rude,
proposed
just
an
another,
alternative. You just shot
another
it
issue you
down.
want to bring up, because it's just arguing
Never
back and
proposed
forth.
an
It's-
alternative. You just shot it
Never
down.
meant for
I
that to
always said it
happen.
should go
So
through
is there
a
anything
full
else that you want
environmental
to discuss?
impact
Your
statement.
floor is yours. If there's
Basic
other
by
issues.
what's required for a
Any
project
wa-
that
Guys,
size in a municipality.
Any
of our
water
size.
district would go through that.
Stop,
Specific
stop,
requests or
Any water
stop.
district
that
would.
we can
Come on.
consider this
Come on.
evening.
What's
or
your know why you
specific
shut it
So
requests?
specifically, I want to make it clear that I am also, as you are, very concerned about the kids. living in this construction zone. And yet the zoning board did not ask for them to be temporarily removed during construction. That is a massive construction site with a footplate larger than the footplate of the Empire State Building. And these kids are literally living in a 18,500 square foot space that is attached to that footplate. So I would like to understand how the town thinks that's okay when I worry about their safety. I don't understand.
I'm not the building department, but I know they're following all the rules, and if they weren't following the rules, I'm sure there's plenty of people who would point it out. But, listen, this is, if they thought there was a need to displace them, I would assume that they would. But again, I'm not gonna pretend like I know the answers to these questions. It was never before us. My offer remains.
Who should I go to is the
My
question.
offer, with the same person you've been going to, you know,
Who's that?
which you.
Of the
you
town.
know,
You're
you could
assuming
email,
that's-
you could email our building inspector, Tom, you could,
Is
you know.
he the one who
I'm not
is
sure.
deciding these things?
I'm not sure.
Well, I don't think this is an issue that the town has jurisdiction over as regarding the location or dislocation of the private individuals. If you have a concern, however, it should be addressed to the building department.
To the building department?
Yes.
Okay.
The building inspector.
Okay.
The one thing that we control is the only issue that's ever been before this town board is the water. Connecting, reaching out to Ossining to connect them to municipal water supply. That's the only issue that this town board could possibly be involved with in this application.
So not their safety and not
The application was
safety
not
of the
before us.
My question is, in the event that it's unsafe, and what you're saying, and this is meant not to sound disrespectful, you're not an engineer, but someone is analyzing this, I have zero concern that it's not being analyzed. One would think that the person in part to go to are those at the Sunshine Home to say, Sunshine Home, you should be removing these children, and obviously they have liability issues, and they have, first and foremost, obviously concern for the children and their staff and their, who are there. So I would assume that a letter to them or contacting them, because irrespective of what an engineer might say, if the fear is that real, and it's not just your own internal concern, as opposed to a scientific concern, then they should be advised and they should be moving those children, because one would assume, and if not, that's an important question to find out why, that they've been advised that there's blasting and they need to be aware that there's going to be changes and there could be movement of, when I say things, movement of property in the structure, if that's true. So it's incumbent upon them to say, okay, wait a second, this isn't good for us. We can't do this now. You can't do it here. It can't happen. We have to move the children. So I think going to them is part of the response, because it may not change the equation from the town, if that's our jurisdiction, or the private contractor to say, yes, there is a 0.002% or a 0.1% or a 3%, I'm making up numbers, of an issue, but again, I think it falls upon the homeowner, or in this case, Sunshine, as long as we're acting within the bounds of the law and scientific, the rules of science, for lack of a better term.
And to add to,
Well, that's
And
good.
to
I
Jer-
will
Right, I mean, it
write
seems-
them an
it
email
seems
and
reasonable. I
copy
mean,
you.
since he's got
Does
two,
that seem-
since the owner has 2 kids in there, I think he'll take your, any concerns very
I'm
seriously.
not poo-pooing what you're saying, but it would seem to be that you want to go to them if you have additional concerns that are not addressed by whomever is providing you the information. They should be aware of it, and ask them, why aren't you moving these
I
children?
also think that the town should be aware of it, which is why I'm here, and why I sincerely offer to you my concerns about this project over and over and over again. It's not about being, what shall we call it? Not about disliking what they do at all, okay? These kids need a home, they need a safe home, they need it to be in the right place. And our community has questioned over and over again whether or not this is the right place. So,
100%, and my offer to you still stands.
thank you very much.
All right, well, I am going to, since I know that there's nothing really controversial in the rest of the agenda, I'm going to be departing, as I have a 3:30 start tomorrow morning.
Wow,
It's painful.
that's early.
It hurts, trust me.
So, we have a bunch of public hearings. Now, unfortunately, We did have Joan Corwin's daughter, unfortunately, Joan Corwin's daughter looks like she left because it ran over so long, so that is unfortunate, but we had a big agenda with a lot of controversial issues. So do we have a motion to open the first public hearing?
So moved.
Oh, we have to say which one.
I move to open the public hearing on the modification of the noise ordinance concerning the exception of public hearing requirement when requesting a variance to permit noise.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody here?
You want to have
Yeah,
Nick
sure. So this is
give
a
a little
local law
summary?
to modify certain sections of the noise ordinance, specifically sections F and G, to provide that if a notice of public hearing, a public hearing is not required if it's going to be a one-day noise event. If there is going to be more than one day, where the event will last longer than 24 hours, then the town board may require a public hearing, will require a public hearing. If it's just for one day, a public hearing is not required, but the board has the discretion to require one if it views the application and says, this is extensive, we probably should.
Yep.
Regardless, there still will be notification to the neighbors, whether it requires a hearing or not a hearing.
Right.
And that notification will be to the residents that they have any comments or objections. They can advise the town board within 7 days of the application. The intent is the residents get the notification, and the application won't be issued until after that time period is expanded, so there's time to receive any comments. This way, there's not a requirement to have a public hearing for the country club to have a fireworks every July 4th. That was the intent.
Anybody here to
No one signed
comment
up
on
to
this?
speak on any other four.
Okay.
Okay, and Nick, are we going
Wait,
to?
wait, somebody else does.
Well, I have
We
a
didn't-
question
we
for
didn't-
our
we didn't
attorney,
close- we
thank
didn't
you.
close it yet.
Are we going to put in
We're
there
not gonna close it.
that, I'm sorry, a notice requirement to kind of our largest requesters of noise permits, to make sure they're aware that there is this 7-day requirement?
Oh, yeah, no,
Yes.
we will notice that, yes, yes.
They're right, to make them aware of a new procedure.
Right,
Yes.
right, right.
Cynthia?
The agenda is just chock full of stuff. So does this noise amendment have anything to do with construction noise or only with events noise?
This is only for where someone's asking for an exception to the noise. However, if it were for events or construction, it would apply.
But for one day, you're
Correct,
saying,
for one
not
day,
like
yeah.
ongoing construction would not fall into this, but if somebody's having a wedding at the Kittle House and they wanna,
Yeah.
you know,
But
they
it
may
could-
buy,
it
the
could- it
music
would
may
apply
be
to
going to
one-day
a midnight
construction.
Could they, if they would do.
One day, but if it's
blasting or something?
ongoing, it
Absolutely, then
won't.
there's a public hearing.
Yes.
So, just an example, again, I received this blasting notice, and the way it was described is that it will happen not all day long, it'll have a limited amount of time when it happens, and you'll get, if you want notification, you'll get notification, and it will be for a period of 2 to 3 months, but I guess it's weather related and some other things related. So does this mean that would be a case by case? They'll be blasting on a Monday the first week and then nothing until 3 weeks later, so there's
So-
no need for,
So the blasting is covered by the blasting ordinance
Right.
and wouldn't be affected by this.
so that's not noise that relates to this?
That relates to blasting, yes.
Okay.
Because we have a separate ordinance.
Separate
for-
blasting ordinance, yes.
And does the blasting ordinance include public review?
I don't know as I sit here. Sorry.
All right, thank you.
All right. So should we should motion to close the hearing, we can leave it open for written comments till Friday, maybe?
Yeah, we could actually do it for a, Christina, why don't we do it,
So our next public meeting
I mean,
is
March-
on the March 26th. That would be, we put a resolution.
right, so let's keep it open for public comments to the why don't we do it the 21st, Thursday the 21st?
Thursday,
okay?
21st, okay.
Close of business.
5
Okay.
PM.
So we'll use that date for
Okay,
everything.
Yeah.
so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next public hearing is a modification of recycling ordinance concerning collection of recyclables.
Move to open that public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And this just to make our ordinance consistent with the new recycle laws.
Exactly right. So it used to be that our recycling ordinance addressed commingled recycling. Since now we separated out, we've gone through the ordinance and literally replaced every time it said commingled recycling with, you
Right.
know,
Okay,
bottles and
right.
cans and paper goods.
Anybody here for public comment on that one? Okay.
Maybe you should sit closer. It's good exercise.
Hi, so just a question for the West End where we are on well water and the process for recycling correctly. We use a fair amount of water to clean the objects that are recyclable. And I wonder if there is a possibility to have a study to see, depending on if you're municipal water or well water, the cost-benefit analysis of the way in which we need to wash our recycling objects versus maybe having the town be able to wash recycling objects before recycling.
I don't know if
We
we
don't
can do
take
that.
possession of the items.
Of the items, so they're
Right,
picked up.
Sanipro, a private entity,
Right.
picks them up throughout town, and then
Right.
they take and they dispose of them through their re-community sites. So if they are not clean, they contaminate the entire shipment, and
Right.
it all gets rejected and gets disposed of as trash, which is what we really want to try to avoid at all costs.
And they don't have a capacity within their facility
Facility
to
to
do the
wash.
washing for us. It's not an option that.
So I think just something to look at longitudinally. Perhaps you will wind up losing a lot of the recycled materials into regular trash, certainly on the West End where people seasonally are very careful about their water.
I mean, even like a pizza box, they say you can't recycle because the oil
The
from the pizza.
milk box, I mean, all of, anything with the waxy is.
Unfortunately, the recycling world is what the recycling world is, and the markets are literally shutting before before us,
But
so.
it may open again. It's just that China used to take the stuff, now they're not, and now there's gonna be, I'm sure that somebody's gonna fill the void, but it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
And it is still the
After we
law in
start
New
our
York.
geothermal company, the next thing we're gonna do is.
Good, excellent. I just wanted to bring that up about water on the West
Yep,
End.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so any other comments?
Gentlemen.
Okay.
Hi, I'm sorry, I've lost my voice, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I came completely unprepared for this. This is the first town meeting that I've sat in. We're pretty new residents to the area, my wife and my 2 young kids. The recycling side of things is actually quite dear to me, and while we can't, we have the issues with China, we have the issues of what can and cannot be recycled now. And what the town has done by banning plastic bags, I think that's actually a really great step. But one problem that I do see, and I have actually spoken to managers into Chico's, I've spoken to managers at Whole Foods, I've spoken to corporate Whole Foods, to bring up my concerns on this. And you're never gonna get the town and the people to recycle the way they need to do. I do everything that I can on my part. But when you look at things as a whole, that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem are actually the stores like the Chico's and the stores like Whole Foods not being much more strict with the suppliers and the manufacturers that they're purchasing from, saying, we're not gonna purchase this product from you unless you start making changes on your end. And for instance, I was speaking to, going back to the Chico's, with their hot bar, and it's like, why are you guys still using plastic? And they said, well, we had an uproar from Chappaqua moms. We did go to the wax paper like Whole Foods did, but they fought us.
Always
and we were
blaming the moms.
I'm just reiterating. And, excuse me, and he said, we were kind of forced to go back to cardboard. Very frustrating side of things. And then it was just like, well, okay, well, with the amount of prepackaged meats that you have you looked into alternatives aside from the plastic trays and the plastic wrap, which truly nobody's gonna wash that, it's gross. It's just like you do what you can, and if you throw it in your recycling bin, it just like, it stinks everything up. So, as consumers, no matter what we try to do, and, I can play the green finger all the time. I just bought an electric car. I take my own bags. I take my own produce bags. I try to do what I can. But when you forget them, which happens, you go to any of the grocery stores, you want to buy, like, say, 4 apples. You're given plastic bags that are this big. It's completely unnecessary. I bought seafood from Whole Foods, and this was a rant that I had with the manager. I said, okay, can you please not put it in plastic? The guy had no idea how to wrap it in paper to where it wasn't just a complete sopping mess. And so this is where I'm wondering if the town can actually come in and tell, the shops themselves, listen, we really want to encourage you guys to start making the change for our people, because we're obviously hitting a brick wall here.
Well, I think it's a great suggestion. I would also encourage you, not to change the subject, but to join us, if you're a new resident, you should join the Sustainability Advisory Board.
I'd like to. We had our second baby. We've had just a roller coaster of a year.
Congrats.
So,
At some point, you should, because they're willing to take on a lot of initiatives. Their problem is people to handle the initiative. So if you have something you want, and I'm not passing it off and saying we're not going to do it. It's a good suggestion.
In fact, they advise us and they help us put plans together, so.
But the problem is always manpower and somebody who's willing to take on the initiative. So I'm not saying in the future, at some point you should definitely consider joining it.
Okay.
I think you make a good point.
If you have any ideas, to jump in, if you have any ideas, you want to email the town, anything specific that you're aware of in other large supermarkets, for example, that would be terrific. Any ideas we can listen to and run with potentially.
yeah, and next time you guys go in, just pay attention to how much plastic there actually is. Even they've got the little frozen ice cream treats that my daughter loves. But when you go to get it, if you want to buy one of them, your option is a large plastic tub. It's just like I have to go search for a little tiny soup container to put one in. And it's just like, so that's where it's, if we can start making, if there's a way that we can start getting these companies to change, it would be.
It's a good idea.
I think it's the way it has to go, because, everybody's busy. Everybody's schedule is getting even more increasingly hectic and tight for time, and then with all the new requirements coming in, we're just beating our heads up against the wall. You try to do good, and then you realize and you think, well, actually what I'm doing isn't actually making much of a difference.
No, what you're saying makes sense. I mean, it's, we're not getting to the root of the problem.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you just mind giving your name to the town clerk so
Sure.
it's properly noted in the public comments?
Robert Charbonnet.
Sure, we spell
It's CHARBONNET.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other public comment? A motion to close the public hearing, we'll leave it open until March 21st.
Yes.
At, close the business?
Yep.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next is the public hearing, the modification of dog ordinance concerning nuisances by dogs prohibited. Basically, it's a pooper scooper law.
Yes.
And Nick, I know you're dying to make some jokes here.
I'm not onto the dogs. Yeah.
There you go. Some puns.
Really?
He's been waiting to use that one.
So, should we summarize it? I know one person was concerned that.
Clean up after your dog poops.
Exactly. What-
Have
Somebody,
some courtesy and damn respect.
somebody was concerned that their own dog poops on their lawn, it's an offense. No, that's
That's
not
up
an
to them,
offense. It's if you're somebody else's dog.
It's if your dog poops on someone else's lawn.
Right.
You need to
Or the sidewalk or public
Right.
spaces, that's pretty much what it is. Okay, there's been suggestions that the fine should be, what is that current fine? Is it $250?
No, it's 50 for the first offense, then it's like 100, and then it's like.
What did somebody suggest?
Something. It's-
12.
Somebody suggested 2,500, I think it was. Maybe that was a private email to me. In response, he was very serious about it.
He was serious.
But do we want to consider anything higher than 50, or we start at 50? Is that good?
Nick, practically speaking,
Yes.
let's think about this for a second.
Yeah, who's enforcing this?
My dog doesn't poop on other people's lawns, he's very respectful.
Very respectful.
Mine
So
does
if
on
my
Jeremy's
dog
lawn
were to
all the
poop on
time.
somebody's lawn.
Then I clean it up.
And I left it there. Let me not use me, let me use Jim.
Does it matter?
He's on my
Let me use Jim.
Let's use Jim. Jim, your dog poops on someone's lawn, you don't clean it up. Someone's gonna have to come and basically out you and testify potentially, because it's a violation, so it has to be corroborated.
Video, everything's
I mean,
video.
Take a picture of
the
it.
likelihood of this being enforced is it's gonna be quite difficult. You're gonna need someone to affirmatively take the steps to say, your dog pooped on my lawn, we're going to court.
And then the judge has the discretion as to the amount of the fine.
Right, so it's, it's kind of a hammer without a
It's
hammer.
really gonna probably happen with just kind of, I would say, significant
chronic
repeat
repeat
offenders. If someone keeps doing it,
Habitual
the
offenders.
neighbor's gonna go, I'm sick of this already, now I'm taking a picture
Jim,
of
I'm
you.
sincerely apologizing for making you my example.
Neighborhoods. Do neighborhoods have the right to post signs in their neighborhood that say,
Watch out for this pooper.
Yeah, don't poop on our lawns.
I mean, individuals can put that on their lawns, but then the rest is the right of way unless it's HOA or condominium property.
We don't want to see that everywhere. Like, don't
Want to see a picture of
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
beware of
Well,
this
that's,
person?
you know.
But the
So, I mean, it's
superintendent
been an
that
issue
was-
that my neighborhood association's been talking about for months, and I think, you know, we're looking to post signs right now, you know, I mean, I would say, as a dog owner, you know, carry a couple of extra bags, people do forget their bags from time to time.
The statute is
And,
well-meaning,
you know,
but just
unfortunately,
enforcement's gonna be.
it is additive, that, you know, one dog poops and then, you know, then the next person doesn't clean it up because they see poop already there, you know, it is additive. So to the extent that we can just be neighborly
respectful.
about enforcement before having to move to hefty
I
fines.
think it's good to have it on the books, so in those repeat
Yeah.
situations, it's there.
100%.
But you're right, hopefully civil discourse resolves it.
But someone could put a sign on their own property.
That's
You
right.
can't
Yeah,
stop
sure.
somebody
Right.
not in the right of way.
And the police could also do it, just like we have, you know, drive like your kids live here. The police
Yes.
could have signs
Yeah.
that say, pooper, scooper, law, clean up after your dog.
Clean up after your dog.
$200
I
sign.
don't
on
think
my
the labor
lawn.
is too much, it's a matter of, it's not so much someone getting called out, it's that next step
So
of
we will
actually-
buy
Yeah,
them and
someone's
then we
gonna
will
take a
rent them out
picture.
to other neighborhoods.
That's
You
not
all
me.
buy-
It's another bald guy.
Listen, if
another
we want to
bald
help,
guy. It wasn't me.
you know, the hardware store did very well selling those signs that drive like.
All
kids
right,
live
so
here.
what do we do?
I
We
mean,
move to
we
keep it
not
open?
have
We
to
are-
have them in
those
the
on their
lawn.
They could, they could put signs up that say.
Return to the
"Don't poop."
21st.
Close of business.
Yes. Okay, so
Second.
that's a motion,
Right,
second,
and
all in
this is
favor?
with,
Aye.
and then for approval on, these are all for approval on the 26th, Christina.
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Now, this is the best one. Well,
Are
not
we
the
doing
other
it?
one
Are we
wasn't
still
the
doing
best
it now?
one.
Are we still- without-
Yeah,
she
yeah,
left?
because it's fine, we should continue.
Yeah, we should continue, I just
All
felt
right,
that
all
was
right,
shady.
sure.
So this proposal to change Hunts Lane to Joan Corwin Way. And well, first, let's have a motion to open it up.
Who moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And just to make it clear to anybody who's listening, or Hunts Place is the street where the new affordable, the Conifer project is going, just for, you know. And this is not Hunts Place, this is Hunts Lane. Hunts Lane
where
is
the
a street
recycling center
that leads
is
to.
and the
buses
where the-
are.
Where the bus company is, Chapco Transportation, which Joan Corwin owned, and recycling center and our
Gymnast.
DPW,
So-
World Cup Gymnastics.
So the one thing I did want to discuss, so there was that recommendation that I guess some business owners were saying they've been on Hunt's Place for a very long time and they don't want to have to necessarily change business cards, websites, everything else. So there was a proposal that to make it like an honorary street, and I've seen those, they're in the city, they're all over,
yeah.
where it says Hunt's Lane and then it has the name of, you know,
Joan
who they're
Corwin.
honoring it also, so both are there. I think we should explore that to kind of,
How
you
many
know,
businesses
listen
are
to
on
the
that
business
street?
owners.
How many businesses are on Hunts Lane?
I don't know, there are few.
You
There's
reached
World
out to all of
Cup,
them, right?
there's-
You noticed them that we were
The
having
World
this
Cup is the
discussion?
biggest.
Do you remember how many you reached out to? Yeah, Lauren
Yeah.
sent letters to everybody, one
It was like
second.
8 or 9.
Give us a second.
It's the next page.
So I don't know, it's just something to consider if it would have the same effect.
Yeah,
Right,
she
you have
actually
that
put them all
authority
in.
to do so.
Yeah, yeah, but is the whole list in it? It just says Hunts Lane on it, so.
And then
I don't
could the
oppose
post
that.
office,
Here they all are.
if we did it with two names like that, could the post office be apprised that if someone addresses something to Joan Corwin Way, that it's the same place? It's not just honorary, can we make it kind of,
Well, it's either
It's either there
official
or-
or,
yeah, right.
right, it's one or the other, it's official or honorary. So I don't think the post office would recognize it if it's not the official mailing address.
I think there's a big difference between
that's a big
putting a
difference.
sign up that says Joan Corwin Way and actually changing the name. And, you know, I don't want to sound not sympathetic to this one business, but I personally, you know, it's
This is an overwhelming majority.
it's a short-term problem for what I see as a nice, long-term gesture that's warranted.
I tend to agree, barring there being some overwhelming majority and reasons from all, you know, whatever that number is, whether it's 5 of 8 or whatever it may be, 6 of 8, 7 of 8. Protesting, I think I'm in agreement with Rob. So should we keep it open? Should we-
So,
Yeah, let's give them
written
the opportunity,
comments?
though, to talk to their neighbors in case
Well,
their
I
neighbors
would,
may want to join
should we just
them and
keep it open to
ignored our
generally, keep it
letter.
open?
Yeah, we don't need to even close it, there's no
Yeah,
rush.
yeah.
And the
this
other
is-
thing I was going to suggest is if you guys do decide to do it, that maybe the first day of school is a good effective date,
Oh, that's cute.
That's nice, yeah.
which
Because-
would be September 3rd.
Okay,
it's
so
really
let's,
nice.
let's keep it open.
And it would also give people an opportunity to be able to
Do whatever they
do
need to
whatever
do.
they
The
need to do
businesses,
to
right,
alert
right.
people to the name change.
what-
We have
Great
to,
idea.
we would have to notify like Google and the other map companies.
They know everything.
We're one of the people.
They probably do.
They're probably.
probably
I mean,
watching us
people,
now.
businesses may need to utilize both names for a
For a
little
little
while.
bit, yeah.
And by the way, in this case, it should be noted that, we're one of the businesses, but we're one of the entities being inconvenienced.
Yes.
It's not, we're not just pushing other people. We're gonna have to make some changes also with our DPW and our recycling center.
All right, so we'll keep it open.
Yeah, so let's keep this
Adjourn
open through, do you want to keep it open through the 26th, or tell me what you think?
Well, we don't
Well,
have that
I
much
think
of a
the thought
rush.
was we would maybe have it just adjourn the public
Yeah,
hearing and
without-
have it, leave it open again,
Do
not
we
for
have, do
written
we have to give it a
comments in
separate
case
date,
someone
a
wants to-
specific date, though?
If you, are we?
Not as well,
Yeah.
because people
Right,
do
yes,
want
we
to
need
come
a
in, they should know
specific
when they
date.
can come in.
So we could keep it open to the 26th?
That's fine.
26th,
26th.
That's fine.
fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay, so this is.
so we'll adjourn to the 26th.
okay.
Second. All right, do that or no?
Uh,
We don't
so,
have to.
so moved to adjourn to 26th?
Yep.
Yes.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's it for the
All right.
public hearings. Now
Move
we
to
move on
approve
to
payment of claims in the
resolutions.
amount of $61,474.58. This is the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detailed report, all dated March 12th this year. Checks will be issued and mailed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, March 13th, 2019.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve the cost overrun for replacement of the granite curbing on the eastern and westerly side of the intersection of Upper King and Center Streets. The estimated cost is $35,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve the additional cost of $6,000 to Barton and Lou Guidici. Nice. Due to increase in the scope of work and additional time spent for preparation of new parking lot layout, additional grading, additional drainage improvements, and additional landscaping.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Oh, am I doing it? Okay. I move to appoint Susan Meany, Lucille Rossi, and Melanie Smith Klein to the Conservation Board for a 2-year term effective March 5th, 2019 through March 4th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I move to reappoint Ivan Alter for another 3-year term effective December 12th, 2018 through December 11th, 2021, as well as Jonathan Rosenblum effective November 14th, 2017 through November 13th, 2020 to the Environmental Review
Pause
Board.
before you nay or yay. My understanding, after speaking with John, is that every meeting, and I think I mentioned it to you, Rob, that every meeting, they have to temporarily have a chair. They have to vote a chair for that meeting. And my understanding was that he is a person who they always vote as chair. So they need a chair as opposed to every meeting saying, our chair. That's what I was told.
I thought we already appointed him chair
I thought we,
last year.
I
Yeah,
thought we did too. I thought we.
Did we appoint him chair? Do you know if we
I
did?
think we did.
I
We can
could've
check the
sworn
minutes,
we
but that's my
did.
Can we
recollection.
appoint
And
him
when this,
chair
and when this
again?
reappointment came up, I thought we were reappointing him as chair also.
So, I mean, you can do that now,
Okay, so we
if
can
it's so
just
there's
do that
clarity in
now.
the record.
Okay, and reappoint him, Jonathan, as chair. And these are
that's-
for
for
the
that same- for
Environmental
that
Review
term.
Board. Yeah, for the same
All
term.
right, second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the posting for an additional mechanic within the Department of Public Works.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move to authorize the purchase of 2 marked 2019 police utility interceptor police vehicles for $92,523.20, and an unmarked 2019 Ford Fusion police vehicle for $29,168.48. These purchases are included in the approved 2019 police budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to award the engineering services for structural improvements to the
You know
Tricia
what, can we
We
hold on
discuss.
this?
It's in the
Yeah, we're
packet.
gonna hold on this, yeah, but,
Yeah.
Bob Sealy's gonna approach them to see if we can,
Work the number?
Push it
yeah,
down.
push the number.
It was interesting, it was a far lower than the other guy, by far.
Right, but Bob he's a belt-in suspenders kind of guy, so he puts in so many contingencies that it ends up being this much money, but yeah, we are gonna go down.
Okay.
Okay, so just hold on this, we'll come back up to it on, the next meeting.
Number 9.
Sorry, guys.
To the next one.
I move to award the the extension of the contract with the e-newsletter management vendor, Tycoon, who was the lowest responder to an RFP. Rather than award a new contract, we will extend their current contract to maintain, manage, and secure the town's email distribution list, format and produce the e-newsletter, and facilitate the distribution of the e-newsletter up until December 31st of this year, and continuing month to month if necessary thereafter, at a cost of $925 per month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Am I missing on number 10? I moved to adopt the following resolution. Can I have a little language before that? Lisa, come on, you get at this stuff.
What?
We need any whereas clauses in there?
For number 10?
Yeah, we're just going to
No, so this
resolve.
is basically just each year there are individuals who are delinquent in their payment of water, and the town has to pass a resolution to re-levy it to be authorized to be placed on the tax bill.
All right, and that the same be raised by the real property tax in Newcastle liable. Therefore, at the time and in the manner provided by the town law and Westchester County Administrative Code, and the amount of such tax be stated in a separate column, the annual tax rolls of the town of Newcastle, under a column entitled Water Rents, and further as reflected by council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve retroactively the use of town property by Chapel Girl Scout troops for the sale of cookies at the train station, the dates and times listed below.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to accept the following monthly reports for February 2019, Town Clerk, Court Clerk, Development Department, and Receiver of Taxes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize Christine Gray, Brittany Nieder, and Doug Scott to attend the 2019 Annual New York State Recreation and Park Society State Conference from April 7th to 9th, 2019, located in Lake Placid, New York. The cost of the conference is $285 per person for a total of $885 for all three attendees, and lodging will total $540, a room rate of $135 per night for 2 rooms.
Can I ask a question about this? Do we not allow them to have their own rooms when they go? We've got 3 people going, we've got 2 rooms. Were they trying to keep costs low and that's why they did this?
We now have a requirement of the OGS
The OGS certainly does not require people to share rooms when they travel together.
So let's just
If we
approve 3
have
rooms.
the budget to do this,
We
I think
definitely
should
have the
give them
budget
their
to do
own
this.
room.
Okay, I will, you can let them have their own room.
So amend the thing accordingly, what is it, 135 for
For
3
2,
rooms?
yeah, 285.
Let's throw in the wet bar. No.
No, they don't get the mini bar,
Just the
I'm
cashiers.
sorry.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I move to authorize the solicit for proposals for the inspection HVAC system maintenance agreement for town buildings, which would include the following 5 locations: Chapel Performing Arts Center, Town Hall, DPW Garage and Offices, Community Center, and the Amsterdam Carriage House. This proposal would be for a 3-year service agreement with 2 one-year extensions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I think that's it.
I move to go home
Anything
and call
else?
it a day and adjourn this bad boy.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.